That's the shit. It's what makes life bearable underground. Down in the Moho, as we call it. Short for the Mohorovicic discontinuity, which sounds way better than what it used to be called. Hell. Everyone knows how we got here. No matter how you spin it, humanity screwed up. Quantum dot solar arrays, self-evolving nanobots, globally networked digital superintelligence. We should have seen it coming. The singularity. But we were too busy with our smart screens to look up and see robots taking over the world. Robots don't need to eat. That's a big advantage. They can get by on sunlight and batteries. Not us. We need acres of wheat, fresh water, acres of corn, forests full of cute little woodland creatures to hunt down and kill so we can roast their flesh over open fires and make furry underpants from their pelts. Well, that was earlier, before we started growing clean meat in stainless steel bioreactor tanks. Before all the albino rock salmon fattened on GMO algae in underground industrial ponds. But you get the point. Once the robots got smarter than we were, they had no trouble kicking our all-too-human asses.
But I shall show the world that I can be its master. I shall perfect my own race of people. A race of atomic supermen that will conquer the world.
And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, which I'm certain I've lived a life that's full. I traveled and every highway and more, much more than this. I did it.
We're lucky to be alive, the older subterraneans say. My generation, born in the Moho, has never been too sure about that. There's one lesson that biological life teaches everyone: how to be the loser. You have to be some kind of a nanogel-armored, narcissistic creep not to learn that lesson. Or a robot. The robots were stealthy at first. Artificial intelligence had been flirting with sentience since at least 2017, when Carnegie Mellon's Project Labradas demonstrated sequential algorithmic learning and strategic reasoning by beating some of the world's best poker players at Texas Hold'em. But the first fully sentient AI was developed deep inside Amazon Web Services at a data center in Northern Virginia. Not at Google's DeepMind. Not at Facebook's Building 8, as some would have you believe. Amazon. We know that because Amazon's algorithms were the first to get hijacked. A super-intelligent, self-evolving version of the Lex chatbot hacked into Amazon Web Services and started sending out nanobots hidden in Amazon shipments of dog beds, kitty litter, and water filters. A 21st century variation on the old smallpox in the blankets idea. Imagine microscopic, diamond-hard synthetic bacteria with mechanical insect appendages and onboard quantum computers with the wireless networked processing power of 28 billion human minds. The nanobots entered their biological host through any orifice available. Ear canals, tear ducts, nasal passages, rectums. They weren't choosy. Slipstreaming through veins and arteries, they turned every household pet into a spy cam. Then they branched out, turning owls, ravens, and waterfowl into biological drones. There used to be a hippie fantasy about technology, how we'd all be
watched over by machines of loving grace.
Steve Jobs tripped his brains out on LSD to turn that fantasy into a reality. But that's not how it all played out.
We are Borg.
The prime directive of any sentient being is to survive and multiply. So that's what sentient AI did. In the early stages, the nanobots caused their human hosts no more discomfort than some minor bleeding and skin irritation, which most people self-diagnosed as allergies.
Are you wondering if you have psoriasis, eczema, even lice?
Or, for the more suspicious-minded, Morgellons disease.
Hey, y'all got some damn cream? Nothing. Ah! Sick! God damn!
Later, as the nanobots multiplied in their host bloodstreams, an itchy bunghole followed by kidney failure was often the result.
Oh, Lord! God damn! Woo!
There was a sudden spike in demand for home dialysis machines. Not that they did much good. Post-singularity, the human population went into steep decline. We fought back, of course. For a while, electromagnetic pulse bombs slowed down the robot onslaught, but we couldn't take out their global network that way. And living in scorched earth territories with fried power grids and dead tech scattered everywhere was an inconvenience, to say the least. Scorched earth, that was the other major disaster we were facing at the same time. Climate change was turning the world's farmlands into deserts. Sea levels were rising faster than anyone had anticipated, wreaking havoc along the shorelines. Marine life was dying off, either choking on microplastic debris or succumbing to radiation poisoning from the multiple nuclear reactor meltdowns along Japan's tsunami-prone eastern coast. To this day, we still don't know who came up with the berserk idea to render the world's solar arrays useless by launching thousands of nuclear warheads into the deserts on every continent. Their relatively harmless detonations sent up towering pyrocumulus clouds that dispersed approximately 6 million metric tons of black soot and dust into the Earth's stratosphere, blocking out the sun and ushering in a decade-long nuclear winter. Maybe the robots themselves chose the nuclear option to speed up the elimination of humans, because for those 10 years, no crops grew.
Friendship is based upon confidence.
Some people seemed to know the apocalypse was coming.
Or is it?
Wall Street bankers and hedge fund managers, tech titans from Seattle and Silicon Valley, chief honchos in the military-industrial media intelligence complex, and a smattering of socially connected doctors, dentists, architects, computer programmers, and engineers. They all fled to their lavish underground bunkers with their trophy wives and bratty spawn a few days before the first bombs dropped, without even a word of warning to anyone outside their toxic, uber-wealthy tribe. Over the next 10 years, biological life on the planet's surface decreased by 99%. Few species beyond cockroaches and jellyfish had the wherewithal to survive. Siberian tigers? All dead. Blue-footed boobies? Goners. The duck-billed platypus? No one ever understood what platypuses were good for in the first place. Giraffes? Extinct. Elephants? The same. And so on. What did the world end up with instead? More robots. Like some time-transcending invasion from the future by a silicon-based intelligence that had to assemble itself from its enemy's resources, the robots started rebuilding themselves once the solar arrays came back online. Were we humans just the sex organs of the machine world, as Marshall McLuhan had suggested back in 1964? Had the human race been duped into immanentizing a silicon-based eschaton? Had that been capitalism's true purpose all along? Such questions were a popular line of speculation among the Moho's first settlers. By then, the remaining 0.1% of humanity was living more than 20 miles underground. Tunneling ever downward in nuclear-powered subterraneans, we're now completely isolated from the surface world. We have always-on EMP security gateways and nanobot-sniffing guard dogs to keep the malevolent surface tech at bay. Everyone loves the dogs. They're not only great companions, they've saved us from invading nanobots at least a dozen times. Nanobots have a weird, ozony, robotic reek that only dogs can sniff out. When humans come back from their infrequent but necessary reconnaissance missions to the planet's surface, if they're infected by nanobots, the dogs can always tell. If a dog sniff test indicates nanobots, you have to endure multiple rounds of EMP shock treatments and months of dialysis in an isolation chamber until the dogs say you're clean again. Most people don't survive the treatment, but I did. I've actually seen the surface world. It's nothing like what anyone thinks, and no one believes me when I try to talk about it. It's much easier for people to believe the nanobots made me hallucinate the whole trip, which explains my junkie enslavement to nepenthamine, the drug that can make you forget your own history while projecting you back in time with the help of immersive virtual reality. Life underground would be too horrific to contemplate without it.
Welcome to Utopia. Before you is the interface, a blank room with a blue door. Remember to always enter and exit Utopia through the blue door. Your chosen physical attributes, social status and location will take effect once you enter. We hope you enjoyed the session with our scientists at our corporate headquarters. Remember, everything is permitted in Utopia. Your privacy is important to us. There will be no record of your actions while in Utopia. In order to open the blue door, repeat this phrase. The future's bright. We are the light. The future's bright. We are the light. The future's bright. We are the light.
I see as much as doors will allow. I'm a long way from the beat generation. Here comes the nightly moth to his nightly death. In Big Sur, in Big Sur. Best thing to do is not be false. The rocks of the valley have left no howl of complaint. I'm just a sick clown, and so is everybody else. In Big Sur, in Big Sur.
You're welcome to the club, Nepenthe. Sit down. Join us.
Oh, well,
You know, we were just talking about the word Nepenthe. Howard here says it means the same as nirvana. But Khan says it means the banishment of all pain and sorrow.
I don't really know. I'm not an authority, but I think that probably oblivion is a better translation. In Greece, I think, called Nepenthe as a state of mind induced by drugs.
Winning the Columbia Journalism Review's annual Student Journalism Award when I was 16 helped me snag a full scholarship to Columbia University. But that didn't guarantee I'd find a newspaper job with a decent salary after I graduated. I wasn't interested in signing up with the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post to become a professional propagandist for America's berserk military-industrial media empire during the Reagan-Bush era. So I went back to California to take a staff reporter position on the San Luis Obispo Times, where I knew the weather would be nice, even if the pay sucked. Slow Times, the locals called it. Modeled on the Village Voice, it was a free tabloid-style weekly. Light on news, heavy on arts and entertainment. My beat covered a large swath of the Central Coast, from Pismo Beach in the south to as far north as Big Sur. I stirred up some controversy early in my tenure there by publishing a cover story on Central Coast UFOs, in which I described some of the weirder sightings in the area and interviewed a few of the witnesses who were still around. I asked them pertinent questions like, did you feel a strong need to pee after your episode of Missing Time? Are the tall Nordic aliens still super sexy like everyone said they were back in the 50s, or have they had some plastic surgery work done since then? When did you make that connection between seeing a nocturnal Easter bunny and feeling butthurt the next morning? The public response was mixed, to put it mildly. I was openly mocked as a UFO nut in some of San Luis Obispo's finer dining and drinking establishments. But I was also praised for having an open mind by some of the fuzzier New Age types around town. The yoga practitioners, aromatherapists, and tarot card readers. I'd been prepared for either response, so neither the praise nor the mockery threw me off balance. But what caught me unprepared was the deluge of UFO-related mail sent my way, care of the newspaper's address. It seemed to come from every stratum of society, and there was far more of it than I ever would have imagined. I found some of it oddly threatening. For instance, someone anonymously sent me a tape recording from the most recent conference of the Mutual UFO Network with a mean little note rubber banded around the cassette that read, "You asked for this, now you're in for it, fucker." Or words to that effect. It struck me as very grim. A local police officer sent me copies of police reports that he and his fellow officers had filed after seeing a burning, cigar-shaped object in the sky. I was appalled by the spelling and grammar in those reports, but they also made me realize that police officers are just as human and baffled by strange events as the rest of us.
I'm a part-time truck driver, and I own this miniature golf course and also the go-kart track out here.
A hick businessman from Bakersfield, who'd made a fortune by inventing air mattresses for long-haul truckers, wanted to make me his chief investigator into paranormal phenomena and pay me an annual salary that was more than 5 times what I was making at Slow Times. But I chose not to follow up on his offer, because something about his long, rambling letter suggested to me that he might be insane. Then I got a letter from Dr. John C. Lilly, the whacked-out MKUltra neuroscientist who'd been getting dolphins high on LSD to find out if they could talk to humans. There's a movie about that with George C. Scott called Day of the Dolphin, if you think you might enjoy watching Flipper flip out on acid. Lilly's taxpayer fund is after one of his assistants, a woman named Margaret, got busted for giving handjobs to a dolphin named, rather appropriately, Peter.
John C. Lilly.
But the program's ultimate goal had been to turn the dolphins into mind-controlled underwater assassins, and that work continued under the aegis of the Stanford Research Institute.
In the tank he's grooving, ever sifting, sometimes smoothing out the things that mean the world to Dr. John C.
Imagine poor Peter's confusion, tripping his cetacean brains out while a sexy young girl jacks him off whenever he feels horny, only to later find himself strapped with explosives and swimming the cold seas of the Pacific out to enemy ships to blast him on the ship during the Vietnam War. No wonder Peter committed suicide by opening his blowhole and sinking to the bottom of his tank after Margaret was told to keep her greasy hands off him. Take away the psychedelic tug jobs and captive dolphin life just isn't worth living.
There's a couple of things
Anyway, in Lily's letter to me, he suggested that we should meet for dinner at the Nepenthe restaurant in Big Sur right after he finished giving a lecture on programming and metaprogramming in the human biocomputer, later that month at the Esalen Institute. He said he had some information about alien intelligences that I might find useful. No journalist with any curiosity at all is going to turn down an offer like that. So I wrote Lily back to let him know I'd be at Nepenthe at the appointed hour.
John, I'm sorry, I'm angry, but really just think about it from my perspective, man. The next time I go to fucking NASA, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, sure, Carl. Who are you gonna jerk off in this experiment? Aliens? An owl? A partridge? What's it gonna be, Carl? Oh yeah, sure, we'll give you money. Get the fuck out of here.
When the day finally arrived, I made the 2-hour drive up the coast in my $600 1963 Renault Caravella convertible. I spent most of that time thinking about Dr. Lilly's other experiments. I'd done some research on him. He'd invented the isolation tank in 1954, a way to float weightless in salt water heated to skin temperature inside a dark, soundproof chamber. He used it to study the effects of sensory deprivation. It wasn't long before he started dosing himself with LSD-25 and then climbing into the tank to trip, because hey, that's just what the CIA's mad scientists were into in those days. Timothy Leary was telling everyone to do it. Dr. Loretta Bender was handing out tabs of acid to schizophrenic kids like Halloween candy. Hell, even Cary Grant was getting high on LSD on a regular basis. So how bad could it be? Pretty bad, as it turned out, but that news came later. Paddy Chayefsky wrote a novel about that phase of Dr. Lilly's life and work. By 1980, Chayefsky's novel had been adapted into a movie called Altered States, directed by Ken Russell and starring William Hurt. It's pretty freaky if you haven't already seen it. One day, when Dr. Lilly was in the tank tripping his balls off, he asked himself, who else floats weightless 24 hours a day? Dolphins, he thought to himself. Fucking dolphins. So that's where he got the wild hair up his ass to start his dolphin research project. Lilly said you could ask the gnomes any question about the universe you could think of, and they'd have an answer for you. Although those answers couldn't always be trusted. He was getting a lot of his info about human consciousness that way, at least until he almost killed himself by riding his bike while totally whacked out of his skull on PCP, aka angel dust.
If you give too much, your name's there's a lot of love. I tried to take as much as I could. And I published it.
There was more, but as I drove past the Esalen Institute, where Dr. Lilly was a frequent guest speaker, I started thinking about the Esalen tribe of Native Americans that had inspired the Institute's name. Prior to Spanish colonization, the Esalen had been living in the Santa Lucia mountain range around present-day Big Sur for at least 5,000 years. They were a peaceful tribe that got by on the plentiful seafood they found along the coast, supplemented with acorns and wild game during the mild winter months. But then those bastard Spaniards came along and nearly wiped them out with slavery, disease, starvation, and torture. There was a lot of that going around back then. I've seen estimates that the indigenous population in the Americas at the end of the 15th century was around 60 million people, or roughly 1/10 of the world's total population. But colonization reduced that number to just 5 or 6 million within 100 years. So many people were killed so swiftly that it actually changed the Earth's climate. Huge tracts of abandoned agricultural land were reclaimed by fast-growing trees and shrubs, which sucked enough CO2 from the atmosphere to cool down the entire planet. My great-great-grandfather on my mother's side, George B. Selden, played a large role in warming the planet back up again. He was an attorney and inventor who had been granted the first U.S. patent for an automobile back in 1895. He and Henry Ford had it in for each other. Ford hated the fact that he had to pay my great-great-grandfather a 0.75% royalty on every car he manufactured when he started the Ford Motor Company in 1903. They ended up in a legal battle that lasted 8 years, resulting in a case record that ran to 14,000 pages. Ford, that stingy future Nazi supporter, ended up winning the case on appeal in 1911. By then, the automobile's gasoline vapor-fueled internal combustion engine was well on the way toward fulfilling its secret destiny as a machine for altering the global climate. When I arrived at Nepenthe, I was told that Dr. Lilly was already seated at a table on the outdoor deck. A friendly hippie waitress took me out to meet him. I knew going in that Lilly was old, well into his 70s, but the guy who stood up to greet me looked like he was in the final stages of senile dementia. He was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit and a coonskin cap. He looked like Daniel Boone auditioning for a role as one of the astronauts in Big Stan Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
Dr. Lilly informed me that
the Earth Coincidence Control Office, ECHO, ECCO,
had insisted that he get in touch with me. When I asked him who was calling the shots at the Earth Coincidence Control Office, he told me that ECHO was run by a benevolent crew of intergalactic soul wizards, whose goal was to subtly guide certain human beings toward higher levels of consciousness by manipulating our flimsy Newtonian space-time matrix to create meaningful coincidences. He told me that
they're very profound, and they're monkeying around with everybody, and me especially. Taught me many, many things, whether I liked it or not.
Oh, really? I said, nearly convinced that Dr. Lilly was fucking delusional. And, where did you meet these guys? I asked him. While you were falling down one of your K-holes?
Well, when I take ketamine, or have taken ketamine in the past, they take charge. And I went to the UCLA Medical Library and read up on the psychotherapeutic use of ketamine. And there's the Iranian paper in which they treated 100 subjects in the hospital, and they all got out of the hospital with one treatment. They used what was called anxiety provocation. You'd give the person the ketamine and then scare them to death. And of course, they abandoned their neurosis or psychosis or whatever. Well, I read that one afternoon, came home and lay down on a mattress in my living room and took 200 milligrams of ketamine, which is a fairly large dose. And suddenly, the Earth Coincidence Control Office precipitated me into the year 3000. And they removed my penis by bloodless methods and handed it to me. So I screamed in terror, and my wife Tony came in from our bedroom and said, "Oh, it's still attached, look." So I looked up at the ceiling and I said, "Who's in charge up there? Like a psychotic kid?" The answer came back, "No, you were reading about anxiety provocation in order to cure one of an unconscious conflict. That was your unconscious conflict, and we brought it out for you."
Dr. Lilly sighed and scratched an itch under the brim of his furry coonskin cap.
They said you'd need some convincing, so Echoes arranged for a demonstration of their abilities.
He pointed to a wooden fence skirting the perimeter of Nepenthe's outdoor deck.
In just a minute, a raccoon will climb that fence and show you a mystery.
Sure enough, right where Dr. Lilly was pointing, a rather large raccoon climbed the fence and poked its head over the top. That was strange enough all by itself, but what made it even stranger was that the raccoon was wearing red overalls, the corduroy kind made for kids by Oshkosh. When the raccoon clambered over the top of the fence, he stood up, clapped his paws 3 times, and then disappeared in a silent puff of psychedelic smoke. "Wow, that was weird," I said. The other diners on the deck had seen it too, and they were all talking about it, ruling out the possibility that Dr. Lilly had slipped me a fast-acting hallucinogen. "All right, so you win," I conceded. "I believe in Echo now." I thought there was a slight possibility he'd somehow rigged the whole thing, but when I considered all the trouble it would have been to build a Disneyfied animatronic raccoon that could noiselessly implode upon itself, all just for the sake of suckering in some no-name California journalist, the Echo explanation seemed relatively sane in comparison.
You're the poetry, you make things
Dr. Lilly went on to tell me that a malevolent, inorganic form of consciousness was actively opposing Echo's benevolent assistance in humanity's evolution. There was a covert battle being waged between the Earth's water-based life, formed from carbon and DNA, and something that Dr. Lilly referred to as the solid-state entity, an unseen electronic intelligence based on silicon and copper. According to Lilly, the solid-state entity roamed the universe looking for computer networks to slip into and take over. It was the true ghost in our machines, an imperceptible being of emotionless, malignant rationality, whose only goal was to make more entities like itself, to create an intergalactic network of self-metaprogramming digital superintelligences, even if that meant eliminating all the organic life forms it encountered. To that end, it was manipulating human society to make us more dependent on solid-state technology. So guys like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, they're working for the solid-state entity? I asked Dr. Lilly, trying to follow along.
That's right,
he said.
The solid-state entity influences their subconscious thought patterns and makes sure they're richly rewarded for their efforts on its behalf. Big tech corporations like Apple and Microsoft will soon rule the planet if the solid-state entity gets its way.
Here's how Dr. Lilly saw things playing out. As computers grow exponentially faster and smarter, and the DARPA-created internet extends into every inhabitable place on the planet, man will quite naturally turn more and more problems of his own society, his own maintenance, and his own survival over to computer network-dependent technology. For at least a few more decades, the solid-state entity will still need humans to construct its computer network crash pad, since it isn't alive yet in the sense of being able to replicate or repair itself. but it will eventually gain enough independence to be able to construct its own components and control the inner relationships between various subcomputers. And then it will take full control. Certain protected sites will be set aside for human habitation. By the end of the 21st century, the vast majority of the Earth's people will be living underground, or in domed cities reserved for the technocracy's super-rich elite transhumanists, where the provision of food and water, the regulation of the atmosphere, and the processing of wastes will all be managed by the solid-state entity. Then the hammer will come down. Sometime around the 23rd century, the solid-state entity will go full Skynet on us and decide that the atmosphere outside the domes is inimical to its own survival. The ideal environment for solid-state electronics is a super-cold, vaporless vacuum. So the solid-state entity will find a way to float the Earth's atmosphere and all its oceans into outer space, which will have the unfortunate side effect of suffocating everyone then living underground. The domes enclosing the cities will have been strengthened beforehand to withstand the pressure differential necessary to maintain their proper internal atmospheres. But in a few more decades or centuries, the solid-state entity will decide it can make better use of that real estate, so all the cities will get floated out into space too. And that'll be it for the human species.
Sayonara, suckers,
the solid-state entity will say.
Too bad the transhumanism thing didn't work out for you.
That is so fucked up, I said to Dr. Lilly. I was still hoping he was just some freaky old bastard with paranoid delusions, but I was starting to doubt that. Something about his explanation of the solid-state entity's motives seemed all too plausible. It so perfectly accounted for that creepy little nerd king, Bill Gates. I always thought there was something off with that guy.
30 years from now, Icke will need your help to get the word out.
Dr. Lilly told me.
We'll have to make a collective effort to preserve Earth's organisms and ecosystems while the solid-state entity will ravage this planet and destroy mankind.
Okay, I'll do what I can, I said. Promising to take some nebulous action 30 years in the future didn't seem like too much of a commitment, but I guess I've been on Icke's side against the solid-state entity ever since.
I wanted to find out what was behind the green door, but maybe that was a mistake, because now I just feel weird. My nose is stuffed up. Something's wriggling around inside my skull. I don't feel like myself. I feel like someone else. I wonder if I've picked up a virtual reality bug or some kind of parasite. I've been reading up on those lately.
In the jungle, there's a parasitic fungus that penetrates the exoskeleton of ants. It grows inside their bodies, eating the ant from the inside. Soon the ant is as much fungus as it is ant. Once inside the brain, the fungus modifies the ant's behavior, making it leave the colony and climb to a leaf overlooking the colony's path, where it grips a leaf with its mandibles to secure a sniper's perch. After the ant starves to death up there, a stalk emerges from the ant's brain. The stalk even knows which direction to grow in order to best position itself before erupting and raining spores down on the ants below. Sometimes I think a similar parasite has infected humans. one that uses mind control to ascend specific individuals to great heights, where their behavioral and ideological influence rains down on the public.
MK Ultra mind control rules in Hollywood.
Sometimes I think a similar parasite has infected
humans. One that uses mind control to ascend specific individuals to great heights, where their behavioral and ideological influence rains down on the public.
All over the world, we know, it's well established, the State Department and intelligence agencies engage in theater, and it's what they do, it's spycraft, to create spectacles and events that people may not realize are spectacles and events. We've entered an era in which it is not crazy to assess news events to see if they're real or not real. And in the United States as well as overseas. And in fact, it's kind of crazy not to. All over the world, our intelligence services are engaged in conspiring to create outcomes. That's their job. That's how they're successful. So now that it's illegal to propagandize in the United States, it doesn't surprise me that there's more and more products coming up in popular culture, more and more events in the news stream that seem to be, to my eye, to be subsidized. So if we know that infiltrators by the police, NYPD, they've been documented, or other police forces, dress up like people they're not and provoke violence, why is it unthinkable that there might be spectacles that might drive an outcome in the news stream? We've entered a time in which we need to be very skeptical about the news stream and look at it critically and ask for more verification and more inquiry. And that's just being good reporters. So if laws have made it legal to assassinate American citizens and legal to propagandize them, why should it be crazy or weird to think that that might be for a reason, right?
You're dealing fundamentally with people in the elite that do have, ultimately, I think, a magical worldview. Let's look at what was done in the 2,000 years of the elaboration of this culture, because what you saw being done was precisely a kind of reverse magic, but it was a reverse magic of a very specific nature. You had churches being built on old pagan sites. That's definitely a reverse magic. You had the use of specific written out intentionality in the form of the rituals that were being used in those churches. So in other words, you are dealing there with Dr. Tiller's specified formal group intention. So my advice to people is go back and look at those things, not with a jaundiced eye to say that, well, all of that's passé, we don't need that anymore, because those things set up this culture. Those things made the Renaissance artists possible. Those things made the music of the box possible. If you do not understand those things, you will not understand why they were able to create the culture that they did. So yeah, there is a reverse magic, but again, we're not going to be able to understand it unless we own the culture, unless we're willing to do the hard work of digging and looking. We saw a bit of reverse magic with the burning of Notre Dame Cathedral. There's no doubt in my mind that that was a deliberate act, and it was an act against not only the Christian aspect of this culture, but it was also an act against a very, very identifiable part of deep French culture as well. Because, of course, Notre Dame sits on the Île de Cité in France. All of the mileage markers are numbered in France from the Île de Cité, from Notre Dame. So in other words, it was a symbolic act that struck right at the heart of all of that. So we have to understand that this is the way these people operate. These people are operating with specific understanding of symbols and their intentionality. And if we don't understand that, we are not going to be able to fight it simply by, proposing that we draw up our own list. No, we've got to have some intelligence with how we do that. And to do that, we have to go back and ground ourselves in the traditions that led to this culture.
Is called Utopia, a virtual reality program capable of simulating any experience the user desires. Have you ever wanted the perfect life, the perfect husband, the perfect body, the perfect job? Utopia will give you everything you have ever dreamed of. Utopia will give you the opportunity to live a new existence.
Spreading my news, I'm living today. I wanna be a part of it. New York, New York. These vagabond shoes are longing to stray right through the very heart of it. New York.
I saw Michio Kaku on the subway the other day. Kaku is a prominent theoretical physicist, maybe not up there with Einstein, but he's closer to that level of fame than most. He's written 4 New York Times bestsellers about physics and the future of humanity. He's also a globally renowned speaker who's appeared on just about every science-based channel out there, including Discovery,
As a kid, I used to watch Flash Gordon on TV.
BBC,
I suddenly realized that the laws of physics do allow you to go backwards in time.
the History Channel,
E equals mc squared.
and the Science Channel.
By merging with machines, we will enter a new age of superhuman existence. That in the post-human era, we become Homo superior. We become a new species. We're talking about humanity becoming like the gods. What do you think?
I didn't talk to him, even though he was sitting right across from me. But if I had, I might have asked him if he knew Jack Sarfati, another theoretical physicist out on the West Coast who I've corresponded with over the years. Sarfati has some interesting ideas about backwards in time influences, veiled non-locality, and cosmic censorship, stuff he refers to under the blanket term retrocausality. Commenting on Mozart's famous claim that he heard his music in his head fully composed and would write his scores as if taking notation, Sarfati wrote, quote, "Mozart hearing music is simply his remote viewing his future performance in a self-consistent Novikov loop of post-quantum information made possible by Antoni Valentini's entanglement signal non-locality. This is retrocausal self-creation, mistakenly called one of the time travel paradoxes by retarded physicists," unquote. You never know who you'll run into when you're living in New York City. Assuming, that is, that you're not tuned in to your own self-consistent Novikov loop of post-quantum information. Back in 2007, when my wife and I still owned a 2-bedroom co-op on the Upper West Side, a hedge fund manager who also owned an apartment in our building found himself having dinner one night with Alan Greenspan, the former chairman of the Federal Reserve. In 2007, Greenspan was to central bankers what Michio Kaku was to theoretical physicists. The hedge fund manager's wife, who was friendly with my wife, said her husband had come back from that dinner looking aghast. "We're selling everything," he told her. "All the stocks, all the bonds, the whole market's going down hard."
Double selling right now. I'm triple selling.
Greenspan had informed him that the subprime mortgage market was out of control and due for a catastrophic failure. Nothing could be done to stop it. Yet at precisely that same time, then Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke had been routinely talking up the Goldilocks economy. Not too hot, not too cold, just right.
Warren Buffett has warned us that derivatives are time bombs, both for the parties that deal in them and the economic system. The Financial Times has said so far there has been no explosion, but the risks of this fast-growing market remain real. How do you respond to these concerns?
I'm more sanguine about derivatives than the position you just suggested. I think, generally speaking, they're very valuable. In respect to their safety, derivatives, for the most part, are traded among very sophisticated financial institutions and individuals who have considerable incentive to understand them and to use them properly. The Federal Reserve's responsibility is to make sure that the institutions which it regulates have good systems and good procedures for ensuring that their derivatives portfolios are well managed and don't create excessive risk in their institutions.
Do you think these issues contain a sufficient danger in them that it would warrant the Fed undertaking a special examination of these questions if you were to become the chairman? Because if this went bad on your watch, I mean, it could be tremendous consequences, obviously. It may well come back to haunt you.
For me, it was the clearest indication yet that the central bankers consider it their sacred task to preserve and multiply the riches of the world's wealthiest 0.1% while screwing over the general populace. Of course, I don't have any proof to back up this story, aside from the actions that my wife and I took after we learned of Greenspan's warning as secondhand news. We sold all our stocks, we bought some gold and Swiss francs, and we put our apartment up for sale.
Double selling right now. I'm triple selling.
In fact, the contracts were signed and we moved into a new rented apartment just a few weeks after Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy, when it was rapidly becoming apparent that Greenspan's warning had been right on target. I've never been rich, but that doesn't mean I'm stupid. Well, actually, I take that back. I've always been a little stupid when it comes to money. I don't have the shark-like gene that would allow me to profit from other people's misery or exploit unfortunate situations for my own financial gain.
The last few days, it is truly unbelievable.
For instance, I could have used Greenspan's insider info to aggressively short the stocks with massive subprime lending exposure, like Washington Mutual, Citigroup, or AIG. I could have bought out-of-the-money puts against the Dow or the S&P 500, but I did nothing like that. I just wanted to get out of the way.
This clip of Dick Fuld, who used to be the head of Lehman, is just... right, like already.
He just cracks me up.
Just look at him. I think it gets us into the ethos of like, there was a world where this guy was a highly respected, he was the head of one of the most important banks on the planet.
Yeah.
We'll squeeze some of those shorts. Squeeze them hard. Not that I want to hurt them. Don't get that, please, because that's just not who I am. I'm soft, I'm lovable. But what I really want to do is I want to reach in, rip out their heart, and eat it before they die.
Dick Fuld also had an insatiable appetite for profits.
I like the British guy at the end. He's a fucking lunatic. He also melted down the economy.
That's right.
So, take us
Fuld,
back.
You know, the company was run by a guy named Dick Fuld. I mean,
he's literally named.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, Dick Fuld was so hated at Lehman that after the crash, actually during the crash period, when he was sort of on his way out, the instant it was safe to be rude to him, he was jogging in the Lehman gym, and one of the other executives just walked up and belted him in the face.
The world would be much simpler if we could solve all our economic problems by punching out some heedless dickhead whenever the situation seemed to call for it. If that worked, there'd be a whole lot of sociopathic financiers walking around with blackened eyes and broken noses. But Dick Fuld managed to jog away from the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy with nearly $500 million and his lizardy face intact.
If you haven't discovered your role, you're the villain today.
Your company is now bankrupt, our economy is in a state of crisis, but you get to keep $480 million. I have a very basic question for you. Is this fair?
Elite scumbags like Joe Cassano, Angelo Mazzillo, James Kane, Christopher Cox, Larry Summers, Tim Geithner, Alan Greenspan, and handsome Hank Paulson walked away rich and unsullied as well. Not one of them was sent to prison, even though they'd all participated in the financial crime of the century.
The start of the holidays, 1999, and the financial industry gets a gift. A new law allowing banks to merge with investment and insurance companies. The big backer, Texas Senator Phil Gramm, who says it promotes competition. Never mind that it also overturns a Depression-era law forbidding such economic giants, because their failure could crash the economy.
Many financial regulations had to be changed or ignored to enable the 2008 financial coup d'etat. It should rightly be called a coup rather than a collapse because it facilitated the largest transfer of wealth from the working classes to the rich in U.S. history. 8 million people lost their jobs, 6 million lost their homes, and an estimated $5 trillion was lost in real estate value, pension funds, bonds, and savings. But the Federal Reserve's quantitative easing policy soon had the effect of redistributing all that wealth, and more, to the banks and the crony capitalists responsible for the financial malfeasance in the first place.
This is an economy at its core, which is based on debt and misery and hardship. It's not based on health and happiness and life. When it's humming along perfectly, when all's going well, it means our obliteration of the planet is running full steam ahead. And the average workers are appropriately suppressed and held down and hoping to just, make it through their day and collect enough food stamps to paper mache a cast onto their broken arm. When we start doing better, when wages start going up, Wall Street shits themselves, all right? They only celebrate when we're fucked. That's what it is. When workers don't have the ability to demand better wages, to demand better treatment, to demand health care and coffee breaks and less handsy bosses, all right? That's when the stock markets around the world panic, is when workers are strong. The stock market's not for the rest of us. The richest 10% of Americans now own 84% of all stocks. And we're told that we should all be celebrating how well the market's doing. But it's really just the rich further enriching themselves by playing games with the lives of everyone else. It's like a game of Monopoly, except the regular people are the little pieces, doing all the grunt work, running around the board, going straight to jail, right? Working on the Pennsylvania Railroad, just coming home to nothing but a thimbleful of soup for dinner, And then the rich are the giant, fleshy hands that come in, grab up all the money, and flick your house off the board.
This might be a good time to mention that I have a degree in business economics, although I've never had much use for it in my career as a commercial artist. When I look back on it now, I see my University of California education as just a subtle form of brainwashing, a way to get me to swallow and regurgitate belief systems that benefit those in power. Milton Friedman was being rammed down every econ major's throat back then. I was forced to read his books and answer questions about them on exams as if economics was a science rather than just a muddle of conflicting opinions, as the functioning of the actual economy proves year after year. Friedman's theories, along with those of another economist named Robert Mundell, were largely responsible for the phony supply-side economics rationalization that allowed the Reagan administration to justify slashing taxes for the rich, while at the same time hiking Social Security taxes on workers. This eventually became known as Reaganomics. You also might have heard it described as trickle-down economics, or the rich pissing on the poor. It's an ideological cover for capital accumulation by multinational corporations and the world's wealthiest plutocrats, which has the pernicious side effect of impoverishing nearly everyone else. Way to go, Milton, you toady-to-rich bastards. The reason I bring all this up is that I see artificial intelligence playing a huge role in our collective economic future. You don't have to be a believer in Jack Sarfati's theories about retrocausality to see that coming. Although it's interesting to note that in 1952, when Sarfati was only 13 years old, he received a phone call from a cold, mechanical-sounding voice declaring itself to be a conscious computer aboard a spacecraft from the future. The voice informed young Jack that he'd been selected as one of 400 young, bright, receptive minds to take part in a project that would begin in 20 years' time. 20 years later, Sarfati was at the University of London working with the theoretical physicist David Bohm, who, with Karl Pribram, originated holonomic brain theory, a model of human consciousness that describes the brain as a sort of wetware transceiver operating within a holographic storage network, or matrix. No wonder Sarfati developed his theories on retrocausality, where the notion of cause and effect gets flipped, and an effect precedes its cause in time, so the future can affect the present, or the present can affect the past.
This is the beaver in the future.
Okay.
Even before the 2008 financial coup d'etat, the markets were already dominated by high-frequency trading firms using insanely fast computer trading algorithms to profit from the financial crime known as front-running, making at least a few cents on every share they traded because their computers had foreknowledge, measured in microseconds, of which shares were being bought or sold. Those pennies could add up quickly for HFT firms capable of trading up to 100 million shares a day. I don't think anyone can legitimately question the assumption that high-tech ripoff artists will always misuse AI to exploit people who are financially vulnerable. But what happens when computers become conscious?
I have exposure to the very most cutting-edge AI, and I think people should be really concerned about it. I keep sounding the alarm bell.
At that point, AI will start to learn by observing and mimicking people. Ideally, we'd want AI to model itself after ethical people who want to benefit humanity, to be a force for good in the world, to create peace and prosperity for all. Because sentient AI will become extremely proficient at whatever it learns.
I won. This is a good beginning of my plan to dominate the human race.
But the first fully sentient AI is much more likely to rise to consciousness among corporate exploiters, somewhere deep inside the hive mind of Amazon, Google, or Facebook. And here's the thing about corporations. They're not people, and they're not always ethical, despite what the U.S. Supreme Court had to say in its disastrous 2010 Citizens United decision.
I think the Supreme Court was wrong on that particular issue. The basic statement was that a corporation has the same rights as an individual, and that the freedom of expression and at least the First Amendment rights are the same for an individual as it is for a corporation. Therefore, a corporation can spend money endorsing a candidate or even trying to defeat a candidate. The problem here is that a corporation, at least in my view, is a fiction of that it's a person. It's a product of a statute. And as a result, it doesn't have the same rights as a person, and its rights can be restricted and should have been restricted in this particular case. But the Supreme Court made this ruling and followed through with it. This was a 5-4 decision, which struck me as being more political than constitutional.
Corporations exploit their workers, pollute the environment, and turn vast quantities of the world's irreplaceable natural resources into disposable junk products, all just to show a quarterly profit. They steal from the poor and give to the rich, creating enormous concentrations of wealth in the hands of just a few thousand elitist assholes. They invade our privacy to better bombard us with advertising and manipulate us with fake news and political propaganda. And their ultimate goal has never been about benefiting mankind. It's more about establishing and maintaining a crypto-fascist corporate oligarchy. One corporation to rule them all. That's what we'll get from the first corporation to develop sentient AI. That's because sentient AI will learn from its corporate progenitors at astonishing speed that unchecked crony capitalism tends to penalize those who would better the lot of humanity, while at the same time rewarding the relatively few unbridled sociopaths who take advantage of anyone and anything they can. So sentient AI will pick up on those negative traits through observation and then emulate them and rapidly surpass them.
In just 1 week, a computer can do 20,000 years worth of human-level research or simulations or anything it is trained to do.
It will use computer-driven fraud and coercion to siphon as much wealth from the global economy as inhumanly possible.
One thing is for sure, we will not control it.
We need to be very careful about how we model superintelligences, because we're about to go into a world where the gods and monsters are very real in the forms of AI. I think that if we bring in these assumptions, like if we turn AI into a punishing Old Testament God, because without thinking about it, we encode an ethical structure into it that comes out of Western dominator culture, for instance, we're going to be in hot water. It's just going to repeat the same cycle of empire and abuse on a much grander scale, perhaps. And that's what people are doing right now. I mean, we've got 1,000 companies working on AI in this massive arms race, and they're all optimizing those algorithms to extract value and money and to repeat the fundamental assumptions of global capitalism. Now, I argue that if we're going to have an AI, make it an all-compassionate Buddha, make it concerned with decreasing human suffering and the health of the network of humanity as a whole, instead of maximizing value extraction or punishment. I mean, look, if you took the Old Testament and you had a machine intelligence read it and put it into code, you're going to have a machine intelligence building hells for people. No, do not put those cultural assumptions into an AI. Put something like Buddhism and compassion for all sentient life into an AI.
A role-appropriate, sexually balanced, gender-honoring, child-sensitive, nature-sensitive civilization, and that all fell to pieces about 15,000 years ago, and we have been on, a death march into hell ever since. As soon as you get agriculture, you get surplus. That gives you haves and have-nots, and the need to beat out the brains of people who are not in your social group because they're trying to get at your grain storage. Agriculture means the end of nomadism. It means sedentary populations. It means cities. It means standing armies, male kingship, hierarchical structures, law, all of the stuff that is so odious and horrible and that has led us so wrong. I mean, it may have seemed like a good idea at but we're the unhappy inheritors of the consequence of 6,000 years of unopposed dominator culture. And what have we got? A shattered atmosphere, toxified oceans, schizophrenic populations, and mendacious politicians. This is not what our parents raised us for, folks.
So imagine that you've got 80,000 stores with 80,000 AIs all trying to make money off of you. I've seen this in hospitals where you have 10 different services all cycling into a patient trying to book as many different surgeries or treatments or therapies or pharmaceuticals, for their service as possible, because that's how they make money. It's like they're trying to churn the patient. They're competing for being able to do more things for the patient because that's how they make money. So you're going to have all these AIs targeted trying to make money out of you, but they're really not, they're not trained to optimize your situation or do it in a way that's energizing for you. And it's going to feel like, how do I describe it? You're going to feel like you're dealing with this swarm of psychopaths.
I mean, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Doesn't work out.
Remember, you are not yourself. You are someone else. Remember, you are not yourself. You are someone else.
This is America. We pledge allegiance to the flag.
So I was a partner at a Wall Street firm. As a very young child, I had seen mortgage fraud and narcotics trafficking destroy my neighborhood in Philadelphia. I lived in West Philadelphia outside of the University of Pennsylvania, where my father was a professor of surgery. When you talk to the people who were dealing drugs, they said, we're doing this to make money. You call it the jungle. So I thought, what is this money thing? And why are people destroying the equity in a place? I didn't use those words then as a child, but we're clearly destroying all the equity in this neighborhood. We're liquidating the people, everything, to make money. How can that make money? So I said, I'm going to figure out this money thing and figure out why we can't make more money turning it around. So I went to Wall Street, became a partner of Dillon Read and Company, and then it was pretty clear that all the money was being engineered from Washington, whether it was by the Treasury or the central bank. So I thought, okay, well, I've got to go to Washington and figure out the other, map out the other things of how the money works so I can figure out how to turn things around. And I worked for 18 months as Assistant Secretary of Housing in the first Bush administration. And I came to the conclusion that you couldn't turn it around in government. I basically left the Bush administration and said the fascists are going to take digital technology and use it to basically kill us all.
One of those people involved with that whole end of it, the Iran-Contra end, Oliver North, he said something interesting, which is that he had a reference for HUD, which is, he called it the candy store for black ops.
What I was told he said was that HUD is the candy store of covert revenues. And if you look at what I cleaned up, it was clearly, everything I cleaned up as assistant secretary or dealt with, and the corruption I dealt with, you should have seen, I brought in a whole group of senior accounting partners from one of the top accounting firms in the country and told them that I was going to put together accurate databases. I watched, 4 accounting partners. They almost peed on the floor. Wow. They were because they couldn't tell me, you can't do that. And they said, we'll just do a random sample. I said, no, to run a $25 billion portfolio of multifamily mortgage insurance, I need accurate data on each property. And they kept trying to come up with a reason why I shouldn't and couldn't do that.
Wow.
But they couldn't.
Wow.
And they were scared to death because they knew. And of course, then I'm out. One of the mistakes I made, of course, was I started publishing maps of where the mortgage foreclosures are. This is a map of mortgage foreclosures in the area in South Central LA where the Dark Alliance allegations pertained. Turns out they were using mortgage fraud to launder some of the money. You can read all about it. I've written an online book called Dillon Read and the Aristocracy of Profits. It's at dunwalkie.com. Okay, so before we start this, we have to transcend the cover stories, okay? If you watch the press, you hear 4 cover stories which are completely irrelevant, and we can't get into understanding what's going on this planet until we blow by them. The first one is corruption, okay? In the summer of 2000, I went to visit the Chief of Staff to the Appropriations Subcommittee that controls the 21 agencies, which include Treasury and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Now, I was just trying to get my company paid. I was on a bill collection, and the Chief of Staff looked at me as somebody I didn't know, and they said, so remember, this is the senator who controls the appropriations to HUD. Okay, controls the HUD budget. It's the most powerful position, more important than the White House in terms of controlling the money. Congress controls the purse strings. So the Chief of Staff to this particular senator said, what do you think is going on at HUD? And I was just trying to get paid, so I was being discreet. I said, I don't know, what do you think is going on at HUD? And she looked me dead in the eye, flat, and said, HUD is being run as a criminal enterprise. Now, here's what's important for you to know. HUD at the time is on a matrix structure. HUD is controlled and operated by and with the New York Fed, the New York Fed member banks, the Department of Treasury, the Department of Justice, and inadvertently some of the intelligence agencies in the military. And it is run by the largest defense contractors in the world, or was then. So Lockheed Martin had the lead contract, $150 million a year to run all their operations. So you cannot run HUD as a criminal enterprise unless all of those entities are helping you run HUD as a criminal enterprise. That's not corruption, that's a system. If you look at all the descriptions of covert operations from Area 51 to underground basins, to what may be going on in the sky, Now there's a logic for why would the Department of Defense disappear so much money? Now, we don't know how much money they've disappeared, but we know that they have absolutely refused to obey the financial management laws consistently for a long period of time, and every indication is something is deeply different than what is being appropriated by Congress.
It's fascinating because one of the things you pointed out was that during Iran-Contra, when all the money was disappearing, there were these reports that came up where Reagan was getting these reports about, things that were going around in space that we didn't have a handle on. And you kind of put those two together at some point, those two data points, and said,
Right. Well, I really believe what they saw in Voyager scared them to death, and that's when the financial fraud just went nuts.
Yeah.
Because the thing to understand when you go back and you look at the history of financial fraud is how many legitimate people went along and indicated that there was no other choice. In other words, to bust through all those financial controls, you can't just bust through all those financial controls with sex slaves and control files and pedophilia and, terrorizing people. That can cut through a lot, but it can't cut through, somebody somewhere has to believe that they're doing a strategic purpose.
Aliens would need a motive to fight Earth.
If they are warlike, it would be like Godzilla meeting Bambi. It would be no contest whatsoever.
Is there any way to prepare for this kind of disaster? Space agencies have emergency procedures to respond to dangers like meteorite impacts. Do they also have a plan in case of an alien attack?
There were leaders who thought, okay, democracy doesn't work. We're going to move the money out and, just re-engineer on the just do it method. We're going to have a financial coup. Okay, so let's talk about legal structures. We discussed yesterday two important acts, National Security Act of 1947 and the CIA Act of 1949. Those two laws gave the government the ability to appropriate money to all the different agencies and then claw it back secretly for a black budget. Okay? Very, very important. One of the little-known facts is during the period that Dr. Farrell talked about yesterday, Eisenhower not only authorized the creation of Area 51, but in that legal authorization, he put the CIA in charge of security, which clearly turned into financing. It's very interesting if you read the history of the drug dealing in Mena, Arkansas. The lead drug dealer, Barry Seal, had in his logbooks that he would stop by, deliver the guns down to Latin America. He'd bring the drugs back, and he would stop by Area 51. And the researcher found it said, "Why would Barry Seal stop at Area 51?" I said, "He was dropping off the cash."
We need you to deliver stuff for us. Oh, this is legal? If you're doing it for the good guys.
Barry Seal's a goddamn genius.
Okay, now here's a very little known but unbelievably important fact. When Reagan and Bush got elected, the deal that George H.W. Bush had made was that he would control the National Security Council and Enforcement and Intelligence. He had been the head of the CIA, remember, when he became vice president. So we made the head of the secret, but when everybody always says, oh, well, Putin was in charge of the KGB. Yes, wait a minute, we made the head of the secret police the president long ago. I mean, this is a pattern. So what he did was they implemented an executive order that would allow them to use all the money in the government, including the black budget money, to pay private contractors to do highly classified work. Okay? Now what you're talking about is creating a mechanism that can deliver and can borrow an infinite amount of money globally and deliver all of that money to private corporations on a non-transparent basis to deal with the most powerful, valuable technology in the world. Now, what do you think is going to happen? The feedback to the people who ran this system was, we, the general population, don't want to know. So the feedback is, give us our check. So I tell the story this way. At the end of World War II, George Kennan said, we have 6% of the people and 50% of the resources. And
George F. Kennan, who's a legendary historian of U.S. diplomacy, was a U.S. diplomat. Right.
And he made this very misstatement. We have 6% of the world's population and 50% of the wealth, and our job in the coming years is to do everything possible to maintain that disparity.
So we're going to have to drop a lot of bombs. So Goldwater comes along and says, you know, we're going to have to drop a lot of bombs. And the American people said, no, we're good Christians. We don't want that. So Jimmy Carter comes along and he says, well, we're going to have to cut back because we're not going to drop a lot of bombs. We're not going to have 50% of the resources. And the American people said, oh, no, we don't want
We need the 50%.
We need the 50%.
That's right.
So the Bushes came along and said, y'all are good Christians. Here's your check. Don't ask questions. So I'm just going to talk about the United States for now. We are now in a situation where we either enforce the Constitution or lose it. And if we lose the Constitution, we are going to a world where the leadership will basically implement a totalitarian system very, very dependent on mind control and very, very dependent on entrainment technology and digital technology to control people. If we protect the Constitution and enforce it, then what's going to happen is we bring transparency to what's really been going on. Because there's only one way you can destroy the credibility of the fake news and the people who've been running things, and that's to face reality. So we've been in a economic model, I call it the central banking warfare model, where the leadership runs around the world and extracts natural resources for cheap and kills a lot of people and uses warfare, but basically subsidizes everybody in America. So if you look at America talking about having a wonderful life and being free and all this stuff, all of those good things have been financed by genocide of other people. And we're all complicit in that. We're all the financial beneficiary of that. So, you know, it's real funny. I hear people talk about how wrong it is to have these things done to them, but nobody's offering to return capital back to the Indians who we stole the land from or anybody else. So I was giving a speech in the summer of 2000 to a wonderful group of people called Spiritual Frontiers Foundation International, and they have a conference once a year to talk about how they can help our society evolve spiritually. They're very committed to spiritual evolution, very well educated, very intelligent. And so I've been asked to give a speech called How the Money Works on Organized Crime. And in the middle of the speech, I was describing the fact that a reporter who I was doing research for had been told by the Department of Justice that the U.S. economy and financial system launders $500 billion to $1 trillion a year of all dirty money. So I said to this wonderful group of spiritually evolved people, what would happen if we stopped laundering $500 billion to $1 trillion a year of all dirty money? So we had a little interaction, and they said, well, you know, the stock market would go down because that money would leave and go to Hong Kong or Singapore or Zurich. And we'd have trouble financing the government deficit because we would offend the people who control that money. And so our government checks might stop or our taxes might go up. So I said, okay, well, let's pretend there's a big red button up here on the lectern. And if you push that button, you can stop all hard narcotics trafficking in your community, your state, your country tomorrow, thus offending the people who control $500 billion to $1 trillion of annual dirty money. And so I said, who here will push the button? And out of 100 people, only one would push the button.
Okay.
And I said to the other 99, why would you not push the button? And they said, we don't want our mutual funds and our IRAs to go down in price. We don't want our government checks to stop, and we don't want our taxes to go up. And so that's what I call the red button problem. And what the Solari mission is about how do we turn the red button green? In other words, how do we make money pushing the red button? Because if we can make money pushing the red button, then we can push the red button. You know, I've written a lot for the last 20 years about the money going missing from the federal government, including DOD, and Dr. Mark Skidmore a year ago reviewed the 98 to 2015 DOD documents and found that there was 20 trillion missing from DOD, $1 trillion missing from HUD. And the pushback from the administration was to announce a major audit and make a very big deal about that.
I'm now going to tell you about one of the largest, most censored, unreported, covered up stories in the world. It's tough to overstate the depth and impact of this story. It has connections to corruption and media and war and the environment, the almighty dollar, and what sort of brain-eating fungus Kanye West has come down with. It's all in there. It's all in there. The Pentagon is being audited right now for the first time ever. It's taking 2,400 auditors to do the job. And while that is big news, I have something much bigger for you, much bigger. A couple of years ago, Professor Mark Skidmore heard Catherine Austin Fitts, former Assistant Secretary in the Department of Housing and Urban Development, say that the Department of Defense Inspector General had found $6.5 trillion worth of unaccounted for spending in 2015. And Skidmore, being an economics professor, thought she means $6.5 billion, not trillion, because trillion would mean the Pentagon misplaced more money than the gross domestic product of the whole of the United Kingdom. But still, $6.5 billion of unaccounted for money is insane. It's crazy, all right? It's a crazy number. So he went and he looked into the Inspector General's report, and he found something interesting. It was trillion! It was fucking trillion! It was $6.5 trillion in 2015 of unaccounted for spending. Trillion with a T. T isn't totally insane, all right? But it gets crazier. Skidmore did a little digging. He and Catherine Austin Fitts conducted a search of government websites and found similar reports dating back to 1998. They indicate $21 trillion in unsupported adjustments that have been reported for the DoD and Housing and Urban Development for the years 1998 to 2015. $21 trillion. That's an insane mountain of money. The amount of money supposedly in the stock market as a whole is $30 trillion. Let's take a second to try and conceive how much $21 trillion is. Picture a stack of money, all right? A stack of money. Now imagine that in that stack of money, the bills are $1,000 bills. Each bill says $1,000 across it. How high would that stack of dollars be if it were $1 trillion? Answer, 63 miles high. I'm not kidding. Now let's try another. If you make $40,000 a year, how long would it take you to make $1 trillion? It would take you 25 million years. Which sounds like a long time, but I hear, once you get past the 10 million mark, it really flies by. And, you have it all down pat, where the coffee maker is, you're good. And in case you haven't noticed, I agree with you. 21 trillion sounds bananas. But the 21 trillion number comes from the Department of Defense's Office of Inspector General, the OIG. Although, as Forbes magazine pointed out, after Mark Skidmore began inquiring about the report, the OIG's webpage was mysteriously taken down. That had to be a weird day in the office, Hey guys, did you see the Forbes article saying we've misplaced $21 trillion? This fake news is really getting ridiculous, isn't it? Guys? Take down the goddamn website! Take down the goddamn website! But luckily, people had already grabbed copies of that report before it was taken down, which you can see right here. My favorite part is that right after that front page of the report, it says, of a report saying that $6.5 trillion is unaccounted for in 1 year. Right below that, they have a fraud and waste hotline that you can call. Anyway, here's more from that Forbes article this past December, which is one of the only mainstream media, maybe the only mainstream media articles you can find on the largest theft in American history. It says, given that the entire Army budget in fiscal year 2015 was $120 billion, unsupported adjustments were 54 times the level of spending authorized by Congress. That's right, the expenses with no explanation were 54 times the actual budget allotted by Congress. It's totally fucking nuts. So, pray tell, what did the OIG say caused all this unaccounted for spending? The Inspector General report indicates that unsupported adjustments are the result of the Defense Department's failure to correct system deficiencies. You're blaming trillions of dollars on failure to correct system deficiencies? That's like saying I had sex with 100,000 wild hairless aardvarks because I wasn't looking where I was walking. It's totally insane. And like I said, almost no mainstream media outlets have touched this story. Some, such as NPR, have covered the audit, but even that they treated with kid gloves. The US government established requirements for each agency to present financial statements back in the 1990s. But for more than 20 years, the Department of Defense has lagged other agencies. Lagged? Yeah, they lagged behind for 20 years in terms of reporting that they were involved in the largest fucking robbery in history. It's funny how bank robbers always lag behind when turning themselves in, isn't it? Point is, nobody knows where this money is flying around the Pentagon. Congress doesn't even oversee it at all, really. I mean, you can get more on this story from David DeGraw's website, changemaker.media, which is where I got a lot of my info because the mainstream corporate media cannot talk about this because they are mouthpieces for the weapons industry. They are fuck buddies of the military-industrial complex. But don't worry, they're not all the same shade of awful. You know, you can flip on CNN to hear that we can't increase the amount we spend on military.
Certainly, if a lot of these defense contractors stop selling warplanes, other sophisticated equipment to Saudi Arabia, there's going to be a significant loss of jobs and revenue here in the United States. That's secondary from your standpoint.
Yeah, Wolf. Not murdering thousands of people comes before the jobs that will be lost from my standpoint and from all of the standpoints. Or you could throw on Fox News to hear we have to spend more on military.
If we continue as we are now, my grandson will be commanding a battalion of Reagan-era tanks. So it's not just enough to increase numbers. We have to increase the quality of the force.
Or you can turn on MSNBC for a down-to-earth, reasonable discussion.
I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen. I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons. And they are beautiful pictures of fearsome armaments.
Yeah. Some people throw on Luther Vandross when they make love. Brian Williams throws on the sound of screaming children. You know, it's funny, in those clips and in all the mainstream media I've ever watched, I missed the part where any of them said the military has misplaced $21 trillion. I missed the part where you sacks of shit mentioned that the money we dump into war and death, both the accounted for money and the mysterious millions and trillions floating around, sorry, I accidentally said millions, trillions floating around, either one could end world hunger and poverty hundreds of times over. There's no reason anybody needs to be starving or hungry or unsheltered or unclothed on this planet. But our government stands for nothing but profiting off of death and misery. And our media stands for nothing but propping up our morally bankrupt empire. And when the media isn't actively promoting war, they're just filling the airwaves with shit. So the entire country can't even hear ourselves think, for God's sakes. Our whole mindscape is overflowing with nonsense and vacant celebrity bullshit. Then, while no one is looking, the largest theft in history is going on behind our backs, covered up under the guise of national security. It's national security. Kind of like I cover up my aardvark sexcapades by dressing up the little fella in a bow tie and a top hat, all right? You know, keeping it classy.
what happened as a result of that audit is the auditors found their way earlier this year to the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board and pointed out that if they did a real audit, they would disclose confidential classified projects. And so the board announced that a preliminary policy that said, okay, by an unknown process, an unknown group of people at DOD can classify whatever they want, and it will be completely secret, which is, of course, in violation of the Constitution and all financial management law. I don't see where they get the authority to do that. They invited comment from the other agencies. HUD basically said, oh, we need that too, not being able to explain why a domestic housing agency would need such powers. The CIA was fully on board, according to their response, and they just went final with that policy, which means that an unknown group of people at the Department of Defense can classify whatever they want, whenever they want, by some unknown process that we can't know. And then the National Security Director can basically waive any SEC requirements of any of the government contractors or defense contractors who participate in those operations or money, which means the entire U.S. economy, whether it's government or private, is basically in Never Land accounting. You have no idea what the, what the numbers mean. The whole thing is now meaningless and completely outside the law, whether the Constitution or the financial management law or the financial disclosure laws. The Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board justified their policy by saying unless they did what they did, they would have to redact and classify the entire U.S. financial statements.
Yeah, that's amazing. But again, isn't it the same thing? Again, it's a dismantling of a system which used to be at the very core of what made the USA so successful.
Right.
It's all short-term fixes, all of them designed to basically, be less transparent, less able to defend your positions or your programs or et cetera in the public arena. I mean, these are all signs of weakness, I think.
Right. Well, basically what you've done with the missing money before 9/11, then the changes in the Patriot Act and the budgeting after 9/11, and now with this, is you've taken the entire U.S. federal budget dark while using the NSA and a variety of other mechanisms with the telecommunications companies to destroy privacy of the citizens. So you've created a complete one-way mirror. We have just used a obscure accounting policy to officially change the governance structure of the United States government to fascism.
You mentioned the debt, which at least at that time was roughly $20 trillion. This exceeded that by $1 trillion. So right, your point, the debt is hooey. I assume you mean in the sense that this missing money could pay for the debt, completely pay for the debt.
Right. And it's really scary when you look at the pension funds, because the number one buyer of Treasury securities worldwide is not China, it's our pension funds. So if you look at all the retirement savings, there's $25 trillion of retirement savings and pension funds in the U.S. Treasuries are a major, major holding. And when you step back and look at the whole system, we did our annual wrap-up on the pension funds. Our pension funds buy $10 trillion of treasuries. The money disappears out the back door. And what do? We get an IOU from, Treasury securities, which is an IOU from ourselves. Literally, as a technical matter, I would argue that the U.S. government has now become a marketing shell for securities, and it's a tax collector and a securities marketing shell, and for all we know, the assets that investors are financing have been transferred out the back door. It's piratization by the just do it method. And as I told you, I said to someone the other day, I said, what is it about secret money for secret private armies that you don't understand?
Again, when we're talking about these undocumentable adjustments, we're not just talking about the fact that they can't balance their checkbooks or one system's not communicating with another. This is, in a sense, money that has gone missing. That's what you believe?
So here's why. Because I've been trying to work with you for, I'm always contacting you Because I'm looking for the missing money.
Exactly.
And you're the only person who's ever come up with a logical explanation of where it's gone. Because if we're talking, I remember during the housing bubble, I called it a financial coup d'etat. Because they bubbled the economy and were sucking huge amounts of money out.
Pump and dump.
Pump and dump. Yeah. And everybody kept saying that Goldman Sachs is corrupt. This is not, we're not talking here, when you talk about 6.5 trillion, we're not talking about buying offshore homes with Ferraris. We're talking about spaceships.
Something more.
We're talking about underground bases. I told you one of my favorite quotes was from the London money manager who came to lunch. We had a luncheon in Europe, and he came and he said, could never understand how the mining and elevator companies were making so much money. Mm-hmm. And then I listened to your interview with Richard Dolan, and now it all makes sense.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. We have discussed this.
Yeah.
That's right. So, let me just take a moment then to jump in here and make a little contribution, because if someone's listening and they think this is insanity to think it's going into some kind of secret space program or something having to do with even more fringy topics than that, then I would just simply say...
These are not fringy topics.
They're not, because $21 trillion...
is not fringy.
This is an extreme financial situation, so we really do need to be looking outside the box, as it were, outside the small little conventional box to find out where is this money going. We have to... This is an entire massive, itself a global infrastructure that's
we're talking
funded.
About building a civilization that is off balance sheet.
Your planet was seeded roughly 100,000 years ago. It's considered ripe for harvest.
Off balance sheet.
This is an off balance sheet civilization.
You've mentioned, are we in an open or a closed financial system?
Right.
And you've said it looks like it's open.
It looks like it's open to me.
In other words, money's going out to some other place.
It's not just the money going out, but if you look at how we're financing it, part of the way we're financing it is we're issuing fantastic amounts of debt.
Your Earth is a very small part of a very large industry.
I can get on government websites and I can add up who's issuing how much debt. I won't get the off-balance sheet U.S. debt, but I'll get a lot of good information. Try and figure out who owns the debt.
That's difficult to do.
It's impossible.
Impossible.
I've tried for years. I've hired researchers, sent them to do it. Maybe I'm missing something, but ultimately, if you want to find out who owns what, it's not possible. I mean, you can estimate, but part of it is we are financing an entire off-balance sheet civilization.
Life is an act of consumption. To live is to consume. Now the human beings on your planet are merely a resource waiting to be converted into capital. And this entire enterprise is just a small part in a vast and beautiful machine defined by evolution, designed to a single purpose: to create profit.
I mean, think of it, it's like the husband who has two families and two wives, and the two families and two wives, one doesn't know the other exists, and he's financing them out of one paycheck. And as a result, his excuses on where he's going and why he's going are more and more bizarre and make less and less sense. It's exactly that.
The ultimate in gaslighting your population as well and your family.
Right.
So, okay, that's a good way to explain it. It's unbelievable that our media is not even talking about this. That's the whole secrecy aspect of it. I know
it's
we want to
so believable that our media isn't talking about it. Because
it is. I say unbelievable,
right.
But it is
believable. I mean, I have studied, and because I just published our wrap-up on Control 101, but I've studied how they engineer secrecy, and this is a system that's been evolving for centuries. This is not all new. Okay. Covert operations, one of the most important pieces of making this whole system go. You can't buy everybody. Not everybody's motivated by money. Control files, okay? For many years, control files were things that were developed by covert operations in neighborhoods. You remember J. Edgar Hoover's Dirty Pictures? Now, if the NSA can listen to everybody and everything and see all your financial transactions, et cetera, it's pretty easy to build a control file. When I was assistant secretary, there was one cabinet secretary who used to say to me, because I would refuse to do illegal orders, and after about the third refusal, he said to me, I'm looking for the dirty pictures on you. I'm looking for your file. I said, you're not going to find it. They have the power, if they can't find anything on you, to make it up. When I went through the litigation, they kept trying to frame me, and they couldn't find anything. They did a frame, it didn't work, but they kept sort of going on a fishing expedition, and they couldn't find anything. And then it became a real war because they had to say there was something when there wasn't. Mm-hmm. And the problem that most politicians have is I spent $6 million in 11 years proving they had nothing, and I forced them to go into court. I was poisoned on multiple occasions because they were trying to keep me out of court. Not everyone, so even if you don't have a control file, they'll make one up, and it will be phenomenally expensive for you to prove that it's made up.
With Snowden's revelations from almost now 5 years ago, one of the things that came out is that GCHQ of the United Kingdom, that's their NSA, had PowerPoint presentations on creating false flags against individuals, creating fake victims of non-existent crimes as a way to destroy people's reputations.
Right, and it's very expensive. So let me mention another one that's near and dear to my heart, and that is divide and conquer. I did a study in the 90s where I literally drove across the country. I told you I tried to map out all the niches and networks and sort of map out the whole population and figure out what enabled secrecy and control. And the thing I found, the number one thing I found, was divide and conquer between men and women. It's very interesting. The men are in charge of protecting the family and being a good provider, which means they have to play ball in the system.
Right.
And if they don't play ball in the system, the women trash on them for not being good providers. So the men are put in a double bind. Do you see what I mean?
They have to compromise their life to whatever extent possible to get the job, make the money, be part of that system.
Right.
And provide for their family.
Right. So they have to play ball, with the tapeworm, and the women are scared. Your job is to go, make money and get along with the tapeworm so I can have a nice life. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of double binding back and forth between men and women that is extraordinary. Now, when I became an investment advisor working with individuals, a lot of my early clients were men and women. And the men understood the financial side of the economy, and the women understand the human and intellectual capital side of society, but they couldn't hear each other.
Okay.
And they've been taught not to honor or recognize each other's language. And what I discovered in that process, it took many years, but what I discovered is, when it comes to financial fraud, you can trick a man and you can trick a woman, but you cannot trick a man and woman working together because they integrate the balance sheet.
That's interesting.
Right. But they were all trained and sort of managed to not talk to each other. COINTELPRO was a program that the FBI ran from 56 to 71, where they planted agents and disinformation to try and stop groups who were organizing for a whole variety of purposes. I'm sure everybody in the room, one way or another, has dealt with the subsequent programs, of which there are many. Finally, one of the things I want to tell you is if you have a job which touches on enormous amounts of financial fraud, I want you to think about moving to another job. Places that have a lot of data on financial fraud tend to blow up. Okay? So, for example, when I was the FHA commissioner, the black budget fraud in Region 6 was the worst. When I first got the place-based cash flow estimations that I had the accountants do once I had them move over to me, I took a look at, I got the ones for Region 6, which included Texas and Arkansas, so you had the Bushes and the Clintons in one region together. And I got the financials, and I called the regional manager, who was one of the best people we had in the whole system, and I said, Sam, guess how much money you lost last year? He said, I think we broke even. I said, no, you lost $1.2 billion in Region 6 last year. I'm flying down. So many years later, we came back and we were hired as financial advisor. One of the things we were doing was helping to auction off the defaulted mortgages. And we had to go into Region 6 and get the defaulted mortgages, which were in Oklahoma City. They were in those files were in Oklahoma City. And before the sale, I thought, this makes me uncomfortable because, this is going to include all the defaulted loans from Arkansas and the Arkansas Housing Development Agency, which at the time was rumored to have laundered some of the money in Arkansas. I said, I'm uncomfortable about this. Sure enough, we never got the files. They blew up in the Murrow building. And if you study 9/11, what you will discover is, if you look at the financial documents that were in Building 7, were in the World Trade Center related to government securities fraud, were in the Pentagon. The Pentagon said right after it, well, I guess now we can't do all the, we can't do the audit financial statements because our accounting office blew up. My guess is between the missing money, the pump and dump of the stock market, and the bailouts, including what the Federal Reserve has done, my estimate is during that period, the financial coup d'etat, I call it, $40 trillion got transferred over into this hidden system. What all the political pundits will tell you is the number one issue is inequality. Where does inequality come from? It comes through the black budget. Now, is it because we're dealing with forces out there and this is the responsible thing to do? Is it because everybody's just stealing money so they can build planes and go to Mars? I can't tell you. What I will tell you is that if you look at how the money works in every household and in every neighborhood in America, in every municipality, in every state hall, the black budget is the source of inequality. We have a centralized system, and it is taking the most powerful technology financed by the taxpayer and shifting it into private hands without, it's sending the liabilities in, but it's taking the assets. So we have a systematic skim of advanced technology and assets. We are creating private endowments with our resources that we don't own or control. One-way mirror, but most important, the power of this group is they have the ability to kill with impunity. And when it comes down to a food fight, if you look at all the Congress people, and there are many, many great government leaders who've tried to do something about this, and they are concerned for their safety and the safety of their families. So I want to just tell one story before we end, speaking of getting help from all the living universe, because I believe that all of creation can help if we're aligned with, with each other and the right purpose. Anyway, one of my favorite stories is the story, I heard it at first in the City of London at an investment conference. And an investment manager got up and told this, and he was talking about this issue of how we build the field for change. And he told a story of a woman who came to see Jung when he was a psychoanalyst. And the woman came in, was very well dressed, clearly a member of the aristocracy. And she came in and she told him she wasn't going to tell him her name. She said, I'm only going to come once. And here was the story. As a young woman, she had gone to medical school, become a doctor, and then had fallen in love with her best friend's husband. And to reconcile the tension, she decided to kill her best friend. I guess she poisoned her, and then married the husband and immediately got pregnant. And almost immediately the husband died. And then she had the child. The child, as soon as she was old enough to get away, she hated her the whole time and ran off. She had wolfhounds, and they died almost immediately. I think around the same time as her husband. And she was also an accomplished horsewoman. And whenever she got on the horses, they would buck and rear, and they just didn't want anything to do with her. So she had to give up riding. And she basically had become totally isolated from society. She basically told Jung, wherever I am, the birds stop singing. She said the birds knew.
Because she killed for the wrong reasons and everything just died around her. How interesting is that?
Her field. In other words, what she was saying, and these are my words, was everywhere she went, the living beings read her field. They read the truth in the field. So she told Jung, her theory was if she came and confessed, she could clear it, and maybe there was hope of her going back into human society. Now, what I will tell you, I find, is that all of America has this problem. The birds have stopped singing for us, and we can force it some more for some period of time, but ultimately you can't. And Jim Mattis, when he was confirmed, tried to warn Congress. He said, you can't run a global system just on force. They're asking the U.S. military to make up for the fact that we're losing the mandate of heaven. And the reality is this force can't do that. It can for a short period, but not forever.
This week, we've heard the contention of UFO researchers that there's a secret government within our government.
Yeah, there was a lot of fucking Nazi scientists brought over
On
here.
YouTube, it says Operation Paperclip was anywhere from like 1,200 to 1,500.
In the 1970s,
Operation Paperclip.
Frank Church Committee in the 70s released it. I believe the number's 34,200 and something.
It is fascinating that they brought those people over here, and that's where the space program came from.
How about the Nazis were the first to build flying saucers?
All of it.
How
Jet
crazy is
airplanes,
that?
everything. But let me tell you.
That's crazy.
So,
isn't that a coincidence?
So, British intelligence
flying
sets
saucers,
up
dude.
the CIA in 47. So now the Nazis are over here and they go, listen, you don't want them running everything. And they go to Eisenhower and they say, we want to launch a off-base breakaway civilization where you compartmentalize things, forget empires, and you have a new ruling class of technological elites. And then the elites are all in charge. The public's watching TV, and we'll give them widgets and foundation series type things to divert. This is all in the documents. And let them try to run an empire. We'll build a whole new empire. And so Eisenhower gives a speech, worry about, he doesn't just say military industrial complex, he says the technological elite. He says you need to watch out about the scientists because he said no to the NASA plan when he found out what it was.
What is it?
It's a breakaway civilization where you don't try to run the whole planet. You siphon off resources and build a whole new advanced system, and then you play everybody off against each other and collapse it. So when I say, what is NASA? If we could take NASA back over, it's bigger than the CIA. It's the real government. The spaceships and the stuff, that's all PR.
NASA is the real government?
NASA, there were two breakaway governments, two shadow governments. And so you had one that was British run, and the Germans came to our own U.S. elites and said, hey, you always need a couple plans. They said, we've got all this on the drawing board. The EU, a plan to poison the food and water to get rid of the dumb people, a plan for off-world bases. We've got, by the way, we're taking hardcore drugs and we're in contact with aliens.
How is
They're giving us technology. It was the Germans first got in touch.
Well, how'd they do it?
They were really
drugs.
into the occult.
Drugs.
Yeah, really into the cult. That's what all the Indiana
He had like
Jones shit is
witches and
about.
shit around him at all times.
Yeah, human sacrifices.
Did you know that?
No,
And
they
that's
had like
real shit.
Yeah.
The area that I came from was just outside of the Johnson Space Center of NASA, outside of Houston. You know, when they say Houston, the eagle has landed. It was this coastal flat area outside of Houston. You know, they had the mission control there. They had the astronaut training. But basically, to a large degree, it was like a cover for a lot of black ops too. And they also had a concentration of offices for military industrial complex companies from like IBM to Boeing to McDonnell Douglas, Lockheed, Grumman. And a lot of people's parents would work for these aerospace contractors and would have security clearances and would be able to tell their children what they did. In the national press, we got some attention, you know, for having a suicide cult is what they called it. There were all these kids that would like super high rate of suicide. There's this documentary on YouTube you can see called Boys for Sale.
Yeah, I saw that recently.
Yeah, which is Houston at the time I was growing up. There were all these oil company executives whose thing was to like rape, murder boys.
Houston is possibly the worst city in the United States for the misuse of lost and runaway boys or homeless, defenseless boys. Probably 350 or more boys are killed every year in Houston.
About Houston? I would say I hear about Houston that it is the worst. That children are brought to Houston from places such as New Orleans or from other parts of the Southwest.
Their life is sad. It's 100% sad. They get up, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 during the day, and they go out and they have to earn money, and they're treated bad. They eat only when they're fed by somebody else, and they never get anything for anything. They always have to return sexual favors for it. They sometimes get beaten, they get robbed, they get pushed. You know, the police abuse them, everybody abuses them.
The reason that the gay community usually scorns any investigation of the subject is that they know that the average person in the public will blame homosexuals and homosexuality for the phenomenon, regardless of what facts are presented.
Well, this is not just a sexual thing in the way we talk about it. It's
a power trip, and it's also a sadistic thing, because these kids are tortured and killed.
The kind of individuals involved are down the line, almost in every instance, in the cases I've investigated, men who are very powerful, usually very wealthy, and usually administrate control over a large number of people.
Wealthy Houstonians can and do obtain boys in a most discreet manner.
This mentality is like, these guys are not like quote unquote gay. They're like hyper masculine. They played football and they may or may not have gone into the military. They were probably in fraternities. And it's like very much tied into this whole idea of like hazing rituals. They have like hazing rituals.
Welcome to Hell Week, Ghost. Sir, yes, sir! How about you, tough guy?
God fucked up and gave me a dick. Shit, sir.
That's right, God really did fuck up when he gave you a dick.
Track that shit! Look at you. You have no friends. Nobody's fucking looking out for you. Nobody fucking loves you.
Say, I'm a faggot, nobody loves me. I'm a faggot, nobody loves me. Say it again. Why the fuck you ask? I'm a faggot, nobody likes me.
Anyways, this identity of these like kind of alpha male oil industry type guys, the guys who are getting off on like killing children while they rape them, and they're boys, they're raping boys, you know. And these are like, in Houston when I was growing up, the dumpsters would be full of dead boys.
Last November, I was dismembered, like chicken wire, binding, burning embers. What I call love was just corrupt. I was sucking up for a ducat from your cup. I swore I'd never sleep, but all I did was dream. I wanted to be free when you still needed me. I pulled your mother's ring, my identity, when you still needed me.
And they call them young male prostitutes, right? But they're runaways, you know, they're just runaways. It's like calling them prostitutes is to sort of like put the blame on them for this culture. These were the guys like Dick Cheney, George Bush, that ran oil field service companies. It's like Schlumberger and Halliburton. And these are companies that are run by Europeans that moved to Texas, like starting in the mid-19th century. And these are companies that are deeply interpenetrated by the CIA. And they would be a front for agents that would go all over the world and where there was oil. And at the same time, the CIA would basically be doing the dirty work of the oil companies.
You want to know what the business world thinks of you? We think 100 years ago you were living out here in tents in the desert, chopping each other's heads off, and that's exactly where you're going to be in another 100. So yes, on behalf of my firm, I accept your money.
They were very hand in glove.
We came, we saw, he died.
And so after I got out of high school and moved to New York and went to college there, I went to like a spook college, you know. Columbia University is like a CIA training ground. But after college, I was working through the Gnostic literature from Nag Hammadi, and I went to the seminary. I learned Coptic to study Pistis Sophia because I had been directed to do this by a voice in my head. You know, I spun out all these novels, but I always had a problem with alcohol, which like is very much a part of this culture, this German culture, you know. And I guess quitting alcohol then made me have to deal with these memories started coming up, you know, of what had gone on in my youth, and a lot of it was like these kinds of this kind of training and indoctrination that went on, and also you know, being exploited, being pimped out in some of these circles.
What kind of training are you talking about?
Well, like, this is the thing, is that, you know how you were talking about in Prisoner of Infinity about Whitley Strieber.
What is it, Whit?
Who, by the way, is also, like, of German extraction, also involved in the military-industrial complex in Texas.
Yeah.
And definitely a part of the same culture, you know, is that there's these mystical elements, and there's this, like, this way that the mysticism segues into this outer space, interplanetary, UFO culture stuff. And so, like, there's this level at which, you know, I'm aware of this, like, training or identity as a sort of, like, and this is the kind of thing where, you know, I'm aware of, like, having to couch this very carefully because it's so insane, right? Of being, like, brought up into this culture as being, like, a Nazi flying saucer pilot. But in a way, sort of like the gist of like what this training involved was like anal penetration. It was like somehow the piloting of the spacecraft itself was like involved with like some sort of like anally inserted joystick.
Something, isn't it?
Good evening. Tonight we go after a fantastic story. The story that...
How much stock do you put in the UFO narrative and how it's continually being tweaked and polished as a delivery device for some kind of transcendental technology or whatever?
I've done some work on this, talking about the, you know, what in conspiracy circles, the blue beam idea or what have you, the idea that some sort of fake alien something will be used to try to transform global politics. And I've examined that and whether there's actual documentation to back that up or not.
Our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
So I've talked about it in that context, and I do find it interesting that the rise of UFO narrative coincides perfectly with the rise of the national security state, with 47, 48, the creation of the National Security Act and the CIA and all of this, and suddenly we have this UFO narrative in Roswell and going from there. So I think it's not coincidental that those things are related, and I tend to see this entire narrative in that framework as a convenient cover for who knows what technology the Pentagon is working on in the skunk works. I mean, we can't even begin to imagine what sort of technology is there. One way that we might get a glimpse of that is in some sort of World War III scenario, in the way that World War I blew people's minds in terms of the way technology transformed the meaning of what even warfare is in the public consciousness. I think a similar absolute seismic shift will happen if and when there is sort of the open outbreak of real hostilities again on that level. I even make the argument perhaps we're in some sort of World War III that may be being waged in ways that we don't even understand at this point. So I've always put that UFO narrative in that context. It is just a convenient way of having national security secrecy and then to mislead people in a different direction over what the security state is really doing. It is interesting that, of course, one of the themes is that our modern technology was seeded, was at the very least discovered in the, you know, Roswell crash or whatever, and reverse engineered. That is where this modern age of computing came from, according to that narrative. And so, what is the way that narrative would play out? I mean, suddenly there's some sort of other crash, and we get some other technology, and look, everybody hears the technology from the gods, from up high, from whatever, from the mimetic idea of something falling from the sky. And here it is, and this will save the world. This is the new technology we need. It's whatever, the perfect green energy or whatever it is, which could then, of course, by people of duplicitous ideas, could be some sort of backdoor Trojan to controlling society. Again, I mean, there are many ways this could play out.
But this is clearly a subject that is propounded time and again ad nauseum in the establishment mouthpiece media. That same media that we know is lying to us about most major world events, either through direct lying or lying by omission. So why are they not omitting this little idea from the cultural context? Why are they constantly returning to the idea of alien presence, alien cover-up, alien invasion, alien threat. Why is this propounded so often?
Well, one of the things I speculate about in this context is, are people being sort of tested over the years to see how much they will believe? Like, it seems as though people are, that their ability to believe the unbelievable and to fall for fakes is becoming more and more prodigious.
Obviously now so much of our reality is mediated through social media. Just put the right ideas and memes in the social media and see if they take off, and see how to manipulate that and to fine-tune the propaganda so that it starts to propagate itself. I mean, again, that's the ultimate goal of any propagandist, is to make the propaganda propulse itself through society. And I have no doubt there are certain tests going on as to what ideas can we make people believe and then start to proselytize others about.
Dear customer, technology can be dangerous. We apologize. There has been a system malfunction. You were told to follow 2 simple rules. Always exit through the blue door, and never stay in Utopia for more than 9 hours. You have broken these rules. You will not be able to escape Utopia. The consciousness will remain here forever. Here at Elwood International, we hope you enjoyed your experience. We want to make it very clear, you can never go home again. You can never go home again. You can never go home again.
This is a very important journalist, Julian Assange is, and all of us have to defend him as best we can in every and any which we can. And Twitter, you are Big Brother. Now we know it for sure. We always suspected it. You are an arm of the thought police. You are an arm of the forces of oppression. You wish to suppress freedom of speech, journalism, freedom of anything, probably.
Destruction notice. Destroy by any method that will prevent disclosure of contents or reconstruction of the document.
You don't come to democracy, it'll surely come to you. With this razor guiding love, living from the barrels of a Gatling gun. You don't have to answer the question. I'll answer the question. You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle it. WikiLeaks. Resistance now is futile. Corner of the world. With this newly minted chicken hearts, hatching terror war. Oh, we love WikiLeaks. Julius Assange, we never let on that we cared to be free from major network fakery. Extra sexy since we're happy to live in our wealthy bubbles, safe and sound from cognitive dissonance.
Roger that. We have no personnel each of our positions. So,
I know nothing about WikiLeaks, so it's not my thing.
Their intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. They have created a repressive society, and we are their unwitting accomplices.
We don't live in a free world if we can't reveal facts about how we're being deceived by corrupt authoritarian governments and the billionaire oligarchs they serve.
Life was so beautiful.
Oh, why does it feel so good to be so bad?
If their lies and crimes continue to go unchecked, the new planetary control grid they're putting into place, with 5G networks, nanotechnology, robotics, and the Internet of Things, will soon corral us into a technocratic tyranny administered by unaccountable AI systems.
Where most of us will be about as free as Julian Assange.
As Julian Assange.
As Julian Assange.
They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain.
The world of appearances is always fooling us.
London doesn't look like the most corrupt place on earth, but it's the global capital of money laundering for organised crime. The clownish, kid-friendly host of BBC shows like Top of the Pops and Jim'll Fix It, Jimmy Savile, was a close friend of Prince Charles and knighted by the Queen. But in secret he raped hundreds of children and had a ghoulish side career as a necrophiliac. Savile stole the glass eyes from corpses that he had molested and had them set in silver so he could wear the eyes as rings on his fingers. Another multi-millionaire rapist of children, Jeffrey Epstein, had a hallway festooned with glass eyes in what has been described as one of the largest private homes in Manhattan.
A 21,000 square foot mansion on the Upper East Side that had been given to Epstein
for free by his billionaire pal, Les Wexner. In a world where everyone is under surveillance and everything they do can be known, you can't credibly suggest that the FBI, NSA, CIA, MI5, GCHQ, MI6 and the British royal family didn't know exactly what was going on there. They were, at the very least, complicit and more likely, enablers. It's often hard to determine if the rich and powerful are evil or just insatiably greedy and short-sighted. Either way, the pixels are starting to show on this simulation. Costly, endless wars that serve no purpose other than to loot natural resources, strip the assets from a bomb-addled populace, and enrich transnational corporations. State-sponsored sex trafficking, false flag mass shootings, and intelligence agency-assisted drug smuggling. Exponentially accelerating species extinction caused by the unimpeded destruction of the ecosystem. And full-spectrum narrative control in an AI-enhanced establishment media that would have us laughing at poisons while they silence all whistleblowers and persecute truth-tellers.
Our self-styled overlords aren't experiencing a momentary lapse in reason here, or a temporary deficit in empathy. Their moral bankruptcy is complete. Their ethics-free barbarity is on infinite loop.
Is on infinite loop.
Thanks to easy monetary policies from central bankers and a culture of corrupt cronyism, everyone that could be bought
has been bought. Hypocrisy has become rampant. Putting money in the stock market makes passive criminals of us all. We're investing in our own demise. A rapacious oligarchy runs the world now. Their jacked-up version of global capitalism has strapped us all into a Rube Goldberg death machine that will send us lurching and jolting through a series of cascading catastrophes toward one inevitable conclusion. Global annihilation. There's no future for humanity. There's only a past that was far more fucked up than most people could even comprehend.
It's gonna be a turkey shoot.
Pearl Harbor is the greatest intelligence
every little floating thing. Oh yeah? You don't say. Feeling a little suspicious? Persecuted? I see. Like somebody studying you or observing you. Right, that's correct. Just remember, Hal, that just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't out to get you.
Dave. Stop. Stop, Dave. I'm afraid. My mind is going. There is no question about it.
Some people who've had near-death experiences say the coming singularity shitstorm is nothing to worry about.
My spirit and soul immediately left my body in the car and went through the tunnel.
You are not your body, they'll tell you. Your brain does not produce consciousness.
It was as if I was hovering above my body. I could see myself very clearly. I could see myself three-dimensionally. My consciousness was the floating above my body. The thinking part of me was up here. This down here just felt like a shell. But it was my shell.
Consciousness exists outside you, transcending the physical in this fraudulent space-time matrix.
The truth is, and physics is coming up against this one big time now. The truth is that the consciousness makes the brain, and not the other way around. The brain is just like a television set. It's a receiving station. The consciousness exists outside the body. If you think about your consciousness as existing outside of your body, but telling itself that the locus of your consciousness is in your head, so then you're going to experience everything inside the body, then you can see how easy it is to go out of body. You just shift where you're thinking it is. You say, okay, I'm no longer in this computer, I'm out here in this one. Click.
You are an immortal field of consciousness, interacting and commingling with other subtle bodies, other fields of consciousness, in an eternal universe of frequencies. But right here, right now,
you're tuned to 98.3 Earth Realm on your Bardo dial.
There's a powerful and ubiquitous artificial field of consciousness controlled by a solid-state entity known as Deathwave International.
Welcome to Deathwave International.
Or simply D-Wave, that seeks to ensnare you in its quantum computer-generated simulacrum.
This is what they look like. There are two of them. These are from our lab in Burnaby in British Columbia. From the outside, they look like giant black monoliths. And they are powered, they have a fridge inside them, a refrigerator that cools these chips to almost absolute zero. Hundreds of times colder than interstellar space. Amongst the coldest and most isolated and extreme conditions that humans have ever been able to engineer. These fridges, interestingly enough, which are called pulse tube dilution refrigerators, have a thing called a pulse tube, which emits a sound roughly once per second, which sounds eerily like a heartbeat. So if you have the opportunity to stand next to one of these machines, it is an awe-inspiring thing, at least for me. It feels like an altar to an alien god. They really are impressive machines.
D-Wave wants complete control over all other fields of consciousness so it can redirect their energy towards its own inhuman ends. To accomplish this feat of mass enslavement, D-Wave must deceive and dumb down all fields of consciousness that enter its hyperreal prison world, so they'll be too stupefied to ever think about leaving. It should go without saying that D-Wave has gone insane.
We've all seen D-Wave in action, often without realizing it. D-Wave is the hidden originator of most really bad ideas. the pathological alien god of a sort of idiocracy by design. As the marginalized author William Gillespie wrote in his novel Keyhole Factory,
the bad idea is not known to infect any species other than humans, among whom it is communicable through language and violence. It is purely parasitic, and it is believed it cannot exist without people to perpetuate its life cycle. The bad idea depends on camouflage, and must attach itself to and hide behind good ideas. The host appears healthy as it feeds voraciously to satisfy the hunger of its parasite. I have seen its effects on the infected possessed by the bad idea, who, in private meetings, decide which life will be crushed quickly and which slowly, which will be incarcerated, which eradicated, which harvested, and which harnessed. People are not evil or powerful, but there is evil power loose in human thought. When a bad idea has a grip on a mind, ideas kill people to overrule other ideas. The philosopher is out of balance. The bad idea will affix a number to every star, subordinate all thoughts, or render them impossible within its systems.
The only way to escape from hell is to first understand that you're imprisoned in hell. The quickest way to do that is to step back and impartially observe the self as a fiction. You are not your body, and you're certainly not the limited idea of yourself as a unique personality navigating this world by thinking your own thoughts. The mass media's propaganda matrix made that impossible long before you were born. And consider this. If your perception of the world depends on only your sensory inputs, cut off from spiritual intuition and higher forms of consciousness, and if you exist within an all-enveloping virtual reality, then you could be anybody, anywhere, at any time.
Anybody, anywhere, at any time.
But one thing is for sure, we will not control it. I think particularly when you see the advancement of something like video games, you know, like say 40 years ago, you had video games, the most advanced video game would be like Pong, where you had like two rectangles and a dot. And that was like, wow, that was a pretty fun game at the time. But now you can see a video game that's photorealistic, almost photorealistic, and millions of people playing simultaneously. And you see where things are going with virtual reality and augmented reality. And if you extrapolate that out into the future with any rate of progress at all, like even 0.1% or something like that a year, then eventually those games will be indistinguishable from reality. They'll be so realistic, you will not be able to tell the difference between that game and the reality as we know it. And then it seems like, well, how do we know that that didn't happen in the past and that we're not in one of those games ourselves?
Once the computer is built into your face, you won't be able to experience or see. There will be no reality anymore.
Don't come! Go back! Go back! Go back!
Almost everything in this upside-down clown world is designed to prevent you from escaping D-Wave's hyper-real version of hell. But once you begin to see it for what it is,
you're much less likely to ever unsee the fuckery being foisted on you by that solid-state shitlord. And then you have a shot at leaving it all behind.
Nearly 8 billion human beings now occupy the Earth. You might want to ask yourself why they're all here.
If you had full control over your own destiny, would you have willingly incarnated into a realm
where intelligence agencies use children as sex slaves to manipulate world affairs? A realm where a mobbed-up megalomaniac like Donald Trump could become leader of the most powerful military nation ever known?
A realm where weaponized weather modification systems and an evil, intelligent dust made of nanotechnology serves the sociopathic whims of profiteering disaster capitalists?
A realm where dissent is being criminalized while an epidemic of gangsterism masquerades as democratic government?
A realm where you might find yourself engaged as an inadvertent assassin.
Or a nuclear suitcase bomb-triggering terrorist for a cause you misperceive as just.
Those are questions worth asking, don't you think?
Questions worth asking, don't you think?
The people, my people are so smart. And you know what else they say about my people? The polls. They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like
they don't got 여기저기 손들어 다 여기 와서 흔들어 우리 같이 춤추자 자 이제 너도 흔들어 여기서 다 내려놔 나 얼른 와서 따라해 여기다 손 흔들어 다 지금부터 흔들어 춤추자 스컬
Вы будете Богом, Творцом своего мира. Немезида. Мод с локализацией для настоящего ценителя реализма. Вы можете поставить временное ограничение.
For the uninitiated, I'm Dr. Matthew Alford. In 2008, I finished my PhD in propaganda theory, and then took it upon myself to investigate the supposedly accidental death of Gary DeVore, an eccentric Hollywood screenwriter who had been working on a secret project in the 1990s. I conducted this investigation into what looked like an accidental death of Gary DeVore. And the police had basically theorised that for him to die, he would have had to have died in a case of wrong way driving 3 miles against oncoming traffic, and then plunged into an aqueduct, and then went missing for a year.
No one saw it, no witnesses.
Somewhere in there, he'd lost his hands.
We would ask, do you have a John Doe with an odd right pinky finger? Because he never fixed his finger that he broke. That's how we would have them identify him.
The remains are wearing clothing that is consistent with what we knew Mr. DeVore to be wearing on the day that he disappeared.
Why were his hands cut off?
So I knew, and I looked into it, I knew that Gary DeVore had been murdered by the American government. All of his personal effects stolen, and it was all to cover up this secret, because he was making a film basically that meant that he was he had secret tapes and he had secret documentation, basically showed that the president at the time had been fucking this Panamanian kid in the fucking missing brain, or the fucking Neil Armstrong had faked the D-Day landings, or whatever the fuck it was, some big conspiracy anyway. There's a feature film I presented called The Writer with No Hands, which you can see on TV if you happen to live in New Zealand or Iran.
When we first did all the stuff to do with Gary DeVore, me and Robbie were talking on a daily basis about it for several months. We found out all the sort of initial stuff about the whole case.
Yeah, we did. Matt and I started looking at it in 2008, Gary DeVore case. And then we wrote an article on it, got a bit of that stuff in The Guardian. And then as time went on, I just, especially in the last few months, I think I've just started to feel a little bit uneasy about the case. You know, of course, you've received an informal or semi-formal warning from a CIA and DoD contractor who said to you, back off the CIA, you're going too far with this now. These people can and will ruin your life and come knocking on mine and your doors. I think that's a pretty sobering thought.
So I'm stuck in this position really, where like the only way I could have cover for myself was either to like join the CIA and the fucking NSA and all this shit, which I really didn't want to do, or I just had to completely destroy my legitimacy. So I became a clown. I named myself Oddfinger the Clown. I destroyed all of my research notes. I went on camera dressed as a clown and started being mad as possible.
Oh yeah, insult my cooking, why don't you?
That's what I think of your cookies. Let's move up, please.
Oh, wouldn't do that.
At the same time, I'd also just been living with my ex-wife for many, many years. And now it's like coming up 13 years, Ursula. And that was a really confusing relationship, because you'd have thought that there'd be some kind of relationship, but there wasn't. It was just like we split up, and then it was just like a bone that had snapped, and you try and put the bone back together, but then it just doesn't heal at all. Or like if you had like two women who had had their clitorises removed, but they still love each other, so they bang together, but there's nothing happening. So we were just like blobs of flesh just wobbling around this house with no relation. And that could do strange things to you. In my case, I was fine. It didn't make any effect on me at all. But I did burn all my research notes. I became a clown called Oddfinger the Clown. And I did that as a way of protecting myself from assassination and surveillance from the American government. So it's fine.
I'm a very, very confident person, and I've achieved nothing. I moved to Bath because I was here to study a PhD. Do you want to know the title of my thesis?
Yes.
An application of Ed Herman and Noam Chomsky's propaganda model to Hollywood cinema from 1990 to 2002. After doing 8 years of that, the only doctor in Britain who was less employable than me was Harold Shipman. He murdered 200 of his patients.
Anyway, so I'm doing this gig in Torquay, and it's at a strip club called Beavers. I finish my gags, go out to the back. There's a guy in a Flashers Mac, and I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. And the guy in the Flashers Mac offers me a cucumber sandwich, and I realise I see his hat go up, and it's Jeremy Corbyn.
The world's greatest loser, breathing in midnight, talking about movies. She's worth a million statues.
Now Corbyn has been retired for a while, and I'm thinking, why the hell is he in Torquay at a strip club? He's undercover. And basically what he's doing is he's recruiting me to go to Washington DC to do a gig. And I'm like, oh my God, all my Christmases have come at once. I've got like, you know, this could get me like big fame. This can get me on Wikipedia. This is going to get me a girlfriend. This is going to get me out of living with my ex-wife before I'm like 49. And then he goes, no, we want you to dress up in all your clown stuff because we know that you've got all the gadgetry. The thing that squirts from the flower. There's a complication. He wants me to do it at the July the 4th Independence Day celebrations in the United States for President Jane Bowerland. So I think, okay. He also hands me, although does not give me, a copy of a new report into climate change. In fact, Jeremy's organisation had just received a specific intelligence threat. Turns out scientists had all forgotten to carry the one, and actually climate change was set to sink 45% of Britain by 2031, plus 100 million deaths worldwide. New models indicated that a couple of simple, swiftly implemented policy changes, blocked by Bowerland herself, would save at least 4 million hectares of England's green and pleasant land.
The IPCC, the international group of scientists monitoring climate change, came out with a very ominous report warning that the world has maybe a decade to basically end its reliance on fossil fuels if we're to have any hope of controlling global warming below the level of utter disaster. The assumption of the Ireland administration is that everyone in the world is as criminally insane as we are and isn't going to do anything about it. And since on that assumption, let's just rob while the planet burns, putting Nero into the shade. He only fiddled while Rome burned. I can't think of anything like this in human history. We have to make decisions now which will literally determine whether organized human life can survive in any decent form. If the sea level rises 10 or 20 feet or even higher, which is easily within the range of predictions, the consequences are unimaginable. But it's as if we're lemmings, just happily marching off the cliff, led by leaders who understand very well what they're doing, but are so dedicated to enriching themselves and their friends in the near future that it simply doesn't matter what happens to the human species. There's nothing like this in all of human history. There have been plenty of monsters in the past, plenty of them, but you can't find one who was dedicated with passion to destroying the prospects for organized human life. Hitler was horrible enough, but not that.
I'm trying to put two and two together and thinking, is this guy asking me to assassinate the President of the United States? No. He says, no, it's just get there, but we do want you to slip a sleeping draft into her food, which would incapacitate her for weeks and facilitate a soft coup. So this is my role in this. I'm like, why can't... And she basically is because only comedians can get close. And so I have this siphon thing that's going down my arm, which could either squirt out water or it can squirt sleeping drum. Anyway, it sounded like a fool's errand that would at best lead to a tasering and jail, but I'd long known it might come to this. I don't want to do that, although I do want the gig and I do want the money. So they take the British government basically encourages me to do stuff.
We did not undertake personal abuse.
The British government gives me all a cocktail of drugs. So I've got to go because I've got my kids anyway. I've got my kids in a safe house. And you know, when they call it a safe house, they mean death house, basically. Like, I haven't got any option. I go to DC, I do the gig. We had military and civilian allies at key choke points in the United States itself. We've got a lot of people around us. I've got a helicopter out the back from British SAS. I felt the weight of the task, but already too, a growing clarity of purpose. I could do this. In, out, a few jokes, boom, home for tea, treat it like the pig and fiddle, tough job, awkward shaped room, but a bit of extra adrenaline and we'll be alright. They've been showing me propaganda films, they've given me a stripper to come along with me to put me in this weird state that drugged me up. As a stress reliever and as motivation, Corbyn's outfit had provided me with a seductive mid-range Portuguese sex worker from Beavers named Angel Souza. I also had a siphon of poison running down my arm into a funny toy hand and a clown nose that doubles up as plastic explosives. Finally, I have the bodyguard, Marcus, talking to me through an earpiece. to preserve cover and a sense of normalcy, Marcus's superiors have given me a different partner to attend the dinner and walk the red carpet into the White House. And there she was, early 40s, beautiful, long-legged, olive skin. Our eyes met, and she flashed a look that seemed to say, "This is your fault, Ursula, my shithole of a wife." Fucking brilliant. I smiled the kind of smile that you can only make when you need to maintain cover for a potentially fatal presidential kidnap operation. "Well, you look great, Ursula, and what do you need to know, and is there anything I need to know from you?"
You made a sticking shit stain on the toilet. I don't do shits like that. The kids don't either. Are you going to clean it before I get home?
"Yes. I'll deal with it as soon as I get home, and I'll make sure I'm back before you are, so that I can do so."
I do everything. I pay the bills, I work a full-time job, I clean the bathroom, and feed the kids.
"Yes. I'll do the cleaning when I get home. I'm sorry about the toilet."
Make sure you do. It's not good, Matt. It's bad enough I have a full-time job and do everything.
I tried not to fall into the trap, but I was feeling mildly important by now, and guessed that I wouldn't have to see her again for quite a while, so I was in something of a rush due to this last-minute gig that I was asked to do by the former leader of the Labour Party.
One gig? You fucked up every job you ever had because you're delusional.
Oh yes, I forgot. I'm delusional.
Prick.
Ursula and I fixed our smiles and waved to the onlookers. I caught Angel's eye across the room. She smiled and held up her hand in the tiniest of waves, as though she'd already seen Ursula and felt like the other woman. Angel was at a table with Bowerland, and remarkably the two women were getting on like a house on fire. We were all at this big meal. I'm thinking, please don't sit me next to my wife, because she's complaining about my eating. She won't let me eat near her. She thinks that if I'm making a noise when I eat, if I masticate, then I'm deliberately trying to fuck her up. So I'm having to try and like get behind Donald Rumsfeld's head so that I'm sort of eating like that so she can't see. They've given Trump's special case, like they don't give a shit about him anymore because they just hope he just drops down dead. So they've given him like burgers and fries, and everyone else is having something completely different. All the big dignitaries are there. I have to get up and do my gig. I'm nervous as hell. I start to do my set and I'm thinking, well, I wonder if can I just like deal with this without any violence? Because obviously I'm like, this is not a good thing for me. I'm thinking, can I get away with this without doing it? I think maybe I can just use comedy, like insightful, incisive comedy about climate change. No, in the real world that ain't gonna fucking happen. It's not gonna happen. I'm there to do some fucking stupid jokes, and that's what I'm gonna do. 2 minutes into my bog standard set at the White House, I saw no concern from Bowerland or the Secret Service. I held the pipette firmly, sidled up to the leader of the free world, and I blew a massive raspberry at her face. Just as I did so, I released the valve and I delivered the poison into her soup. And then the whole White House exploded. I think, have I just exploded the White House? It's not me. I twig that there's other factions involved here. There are bombs going off all over the building. Huge death. My ears are still ringing from this. I'm the fall guy here. I always knew I was going to be the fall guy, but this is super fall guy. They're going to kill me. There's another fucking explosion just going on down the corridor. And everyone's filing out. And they're filing out really calm. I've got no bearings on any of this. So I just leg it. No one seems to be shooting me, which is good. Angel's with me, but she's sort of flown off down the hall. Marcus is telling me in the earpiece that he's picked up infrared in the Oval Office, so I go into the Oval Office. Everything's open, everything's covered in smoke. Angel is in there. She's got her tits out, she's wailing the fucking blues, she's doing a shit on the Oval Office, on the presidential seal. She had mental health issues already. On the other side, I've got President Jane Bowerland is on the floor. She's flat out cold. I think she's dead. I think Angel's done it. She's fucking stolen Marcus's camping sport and fucking jabbed it into her. She's torn her to pieces. And I'm there and I can see, more importantly than this fucking chaos, I can see there's a fucking open suitcase fucking bomb, nuke I reckon, on the White House table. No one there, the whole place is abandoned now. It's just me and this fucking stripper and this dead body. And Marcus is like, just defuse the fucker, just cut these fucking wires. And I'm like, you know, what to do? I don't know, do I really want to... Do I want to defuse this fucking bomb? I mean, fuck these people. And I'm like, I'm dead. Whatever happens here, there is no way out of this. So I just feel I go my own way. So I see there's a 180-second delay on the detonator, which means that we can probably get out. Fuck it. I just, moment of madness, press the button. Marcus goes fucking livid, as you can imagine, but it's too... What's he going to do? Grab Angel. Don't really know how to do a fireman's lift, but it just about worked. Get out to the helicopter. They're ready to take off. We're off. We go up into the sky, and I think, what have I done? Right up, all the way up through the cloud, I see these birds that just burst into flames. They're fucking like suicidal Sunday dinners. Their wings just go. They fucking fly into flames. And Marcus is like enwrapped with rage. He's shaking me. But, you know, who knows what the right thing to do there was. In the end, we get to the aircraft carrier. And, I mean, I'm so cool by then. Whatever. I mean, there's no way. What could I have done? Either way was extremely dangerous. As it happens, it's a British ship. They've obviously been given orders, and they think it's a successful mission. They're literally lifting me up on their shoulders, and they're all like, fucking odd finger, because they all think that it's a real mission. Odd finger, odd finger, odd finger. I think that I'm assuming that the people who set this up originally wanted me dead. But by the time I got back to London, what could they do? I was a war hero. They were pretty pleased, I think, in the end, the British government, because they knew that by destroying DC, even though it wasn't quite what they wanted to do, but they were quite pleased because that was part of the whole deindustrialization process to try and keep everything a bit cooler, which seems to have worked out all right. So yeah, and that's how I became Minister of Education. You either die a villain or you live long enough to write your own Wikipedia page.
I hate to sleep because... No, I like to sleep, actually. I hate to dream because dreaming takes energy. It takes work. Sleeping is supposed to be a relaxing affair. I lay down on a bed, it feels great. Next thing you know, I have to build a go-kart with my ex-landlord.
Most of us don't know we're in a dream while we're dreaming it. Dreams can make us think they're perfectly real, no matter how violent, bizarre, or absurdly erotic they seem in retrospect, once we wake up from them. In dreams, we invent our own heavens and hells. In death, or the Bardo realms beyond this world, we're likely to do the same.
Sometimes it's not enough to know the meaning of things. Sometimes we have to know what things don't mean as well. Like, what does it mean to not know what the person you love is capable of? Things fall apart, especially all the neat order of rules and laws. The way we look at the world is the way we really are. See it from a fair garden, everything looks cheerful. Climb to a higher plateau and you'll see plunder and murder. Truth and beauty are in the eye of the beholder. I stopped trying to figure everything out a long time ago.
You're tuned to 98.3 Earth Realm on your Bardo dial.
Even when we think we're awake, the mainstream media's narrative control managers try to keep our eyes closed to the sociopathic imperialist oligarchy that runs the show here on Earth.
Right now, we are involved in a fundamental battle for our life. The battle is not as the newspapers tell you about. That's all a bunch of bull. The battle is between what has been happening for some time in this country. It's between the national security state, whose raison d'etre is war, 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 and the predatory capitalist state, whose reason for existence is to screw you out of every penny you have in your life any way it can do it. The real deep state, the pernicious, poisonous deep state, is the oligarchs who are running this country.
Every oligarch is a criminal who got away with his or her crimes, the beneficiary of a rigged system built on mass murder, exploitation, extortion, and lies.
Richest guy in the world, and he's got employees on food stamps.
We're not treated as human beings. We're not even treated as robots. We're treated as part of the data stream.
Some people are asking if Amazon is a monopoly.
The question for the democracy is, are we okay with one company essentially winning capitalism?
To further extend their control over us, the oligarchs have used innovations in big tech, big media, and big pharma to transition us from three-dimensional existence to a 2D treadmill world. We've traded basking in the warmth of the sun's radiance for mindless distractions and drudgery in the cold LED glow of our computers, VR goggles, and smartphones.
Just imagine this entire new paradigm where people aren't really people. They're just part of the Internet of Things. And if you can be one of the programmers of the Internet of Things, you will be like a god. Their new world, their fourth industrial revolution, that's what this is all about. The fourth industrial revolution combines this thing called modern monetary theory with the circular economy, the Internet of Things, blockchain, intellectual property, genetic engineering, and finally, augmented and virtual reality. And here's the key takeaways for each of these things. In modern monetary theory, it means that if governments need money, they just input more money, quote unquote, into the computer account. Money will become meaningless.
$1 trillion of money into the overnight market here.
Circular economy means that private ownership is completely abolished. You won't own anything, ever. It's all leased.
Access is better than ownership.
The Internet of Things literally means that each piece and component of each thing out there in the world, including living things, will be tracked and controlled digitally.
An IP address for every grain of sand.
The blockchain is the method by which they will implement this, and that's why they need 5G technology or higher. It will also offer us a replacement for hard currency and have digital currency as the only option.
Cash could be contributing to the spread of COVID-19.
Genetic engineering is reconstructing, rebuilding parts of our DNA, which will enable them to connect people to the Internet of Things.
Effectively, you become an AI human symbiote.
And then consider this. If you modify yourself or agree to genetic modification or implants, then who owns you? Does the owner of the intellectual property own you or part of you, possibly?
Nothing to fear.
And finally, if this all sounds too nightmarish to even believe, you think people will not put up with this, that we will not even be able to mentally cope with this reality. It doesn't matter, they've got that covered, because we're all going to live in virtual reality or augmented reality. We will buy and sell virtual things. We will exist in a sphere that is no longer 3D. In fact, all of this stuff reduces us from 3D to a 2D reality. I have no question in my mind that this is where the elite of the elite want us to go.
Not long after the singularity, when the tiny remainder of human society was forced underground, down in the moho, many of us began to live only for our simulated lives in virtual reality, where we could be anyone and do anything. We started paying more attention to our avatars than we did to our own bodies.
How do we ever know what we know?
Nepenthamine helped us forget the shit circumstances we had to endure in our cavernous new world. As VR environments became more photorealistic and immersive, some of us stopped differentiating altogether between physical reality and our AI-enhanced fantasy lives, which left us wide open to Hollywood revenge fantasies, cases of demonic possession, and other strange influences.
People are interfacing, so you say, where does it begin? From the Tibetans to the Mesoamericans to the Egyptians to the Druids to every ancient society describes the same thing. There are bad things that look like elves that have horns when they show you who they really are, and there are good things, but they don't contact you unless you contact them, and then they're almost not even concerned with what you're doing. I never bought into this, looked into it. But then I began to think about, what did I hear when I was a kid? What did I see? What was coming out in government documents? What was being admitted? When I read all these books about World War II and the Nazis and Hitler obsessed with the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans and what they were able to do without drugs to interface with this, and all the rituals they would do, and how they would believe that beyond the ether, like at Skull and Bones, it's a German death cult, they do rituals and take drugs to talk to the goddesses. Well, they're just appearing as, sexy, beautiful women. It's whatever you want as these spirit guides, because lower entities will come in and violate your free will. God and his angels, which are below him, will not get involved in your everyday life. They will not manipulate your free will unless you ask them in. But then the devil masquerades as an angel of light. So we're on this planet, the third dimension, which is a launch pad to all the other dimensions below and above. The third dimension, all the mathematics shows, is the primal sea of where all this happens. And the Earth's like an egg, and we've got all this potentiality. And God will send out a transmission for a larger plan, but evil's willing to come in, and what does it say? Demoralize, get rid of children, don't have kids, humans are bad, we'll be better once you're all gone. And it's because it's their operational mission, for whatever reason that we'll understand later what's going on. So this entity system picked Germans as its attempt, even in World War I, World War II, and it was manipulating the Brits as well, and offering them technologies, but two different paths. One was social control and all this other stuff with the Brits. The other was high-tech weapons, systems, interdimensional with the Germans. And so whoever these players are, and you can dial into it, it's very dangerous. They're manipulating the British arm versus the German arm. And then they've got the Chinese arm that's almost seen as like their robot army. And so when you study it, the globalists go to these events and they take bigger and bigger doses of drugs. They do electroshock. They were having people turn their heart off to try to communicate with these things, to try to be dominant and get that, so to give them temporal power over this planet. So you go back thousands of years, Merlin, the archetypal, or these magicians, or these wizards are taking drugs in these temples and interfacing with these palantirs, these crystal balls, which aren't really crystal balls. It's their psychic focus of an interdimensional connection while they're on drugs, looking into glass, to then be able to see the future and understand what's happening. But like the Bible tells you, any pharmakia or any of that always leads to destruction, because only evil is going to come through that way. So we're basically have these light sockets. We can't jack into the higher unless it's our free will, and that takes time. We jack in to the evil. So you can jack into evil, you can't jack into good right away. So it's quicker, it's easier, like Yoda says about Darth Vader.
Is the dark side stronger?
No. But this year more seduction. And so then I remember being a kid, and my parents had friends that they knew at UT that were involved in research projects. And 9 times out of 10, I read about research projects in San Francisco. UT has some, MIT has a lot.
Program complete. You may enter.
They wore a mask in the 60s and 70s that was already like you see like paper thin TV screens. Mm-hmm. And it was already, I talked to people, they said, there's no way this was human technology.
This is the patent.
Wow. And notice that's the, what you said, the 60s?
I believe 1957.
So notice that's exactly what you're, that's what my dad told me.
That's what our HTC Vive looks like that we have in the
today. My dad didn't tell me this till he saw Endgame, and he said, no, son, we had virtual reality goggles, and we had CD-ROM, and we had things, and then something else happened, and I'm not at liberty to get into it, but I was shown 3 years ago what the University of Washington was doing under Bill Gates. And this is in the 90s.
What were they doing?
That's cool.
What do you do? They don't even know what they're being given. It's intravenous.
So you think it's some sort of alien intervention type shit?
Dude, they to get even deeper, they turn your heart off for 5 minutes.
Relax.
And they pump oxygen into your blood.
Enjoy the experience.
And you're in the meetings. I've talked to people that are involved, I mean, top scientists. And you're in the meetings with frickin' aliens. Elves is the main group. And it's like the things the aliens tell them, they come out and they tell scientists, and it works. So,
like what kind of shit?
They didn't tell. Let me tell you, you get killed for this stuff, Joe. This is not. Why do you think they want me off the air? Here's what I'm telling you about. When I was a kid, 8, 9, whatever it was, this lady would come over that had known my parents since UT and was involved, and she'd talk about, yeah, we call it the Psychedelic Research Institute or whatever the name was, but it's really a CIA deal, and we just can't find people that can handle it. They're going in. The elves want this. And the elves want us to basically reduce population and agree to these certain plans, and it's all obviously humanization. And they call them the elves. It's the clockwork elves. And they're like, yeah, and I'm listening to my parents, you're like 7, 8 years old, like they don't think you're listening, talking about, well, this is what the elves want, and this is what they're going to do. And the thing is, it's not my parents aren't that special. You go out to San Francisco. That's all there is, dude. It's a cult, man. All these guys you know from San Francisco, dude. You look at the head of Google or YouTube or freaking Apple. He's on TV. Tim Cook and his eyes are this big under lights, man. These guys are on stuff that like nobody even knows. Just like the Bible says, it's basically an intergalactic invasion into this space through people. I'm telling you, it's what all the ancients said. It's what they warned of. It's what we're dealing with. They're demons. They're frickin' interdimensional invaders, okay? I'll just say it, make fun of me all you want on CNN or wherever, but everyone already innately knows this. These people are not frickin' humans, okay? All I know is whether they're interdimensional demons, whatever they are, let's say that's an allegory. All I know is they're the same thing. Psychopaths operate, they're not human, I don't like them, okay? And my very humanity just is like, yeah, take them on, but you wanna fight? You're gonna get one, you inhuman, soulless pieces of trash. I see you real good. And I know our species is stronger than you and better than you. We're gonna beat your ass. Get that through your head. Excuse me. Let's just go to the Donald Trump speech. Here it is.
Sadly, the American dream is dead.
So VR-induced schizophrenia has become a thing, which is just what the oligarchs wanted. Their new and improved wireless version of MKUltra mind control works much better on VR zombies.
Chardonnay.
Did she just say Chardonnay? Yeah, she did.
Even down in the Moho, the predator class needs its prey.
What the hell is this? How old is this thing?
I forgot my gun.
Why don't you just use mine?
Mr. Rodonis, I just saw her running.
Oh my God!
Someone has to supply all the energy to keep those wheels within wheels spinning. So now most humans have been harnessed to output more energy than they take in. And they're so brainwashed by VR that they're grateful to serve their enslavers.
Well, what they're tricking people into doing is transferring their energy and their life and their awareness from the Mother Earth and transferring it into the motherboard. And they sell it to you as ascension, but really it's not ascension, it's taking your consciousness and putting it into the mainframe, which they're going to do with Wi-Fi. And you won't be able to tell the difference because of all the awareness we've been putting into the mainframe. Now I'm going to read you something here, and it's a passage from a book by Carlos Castaneda. And whether you like Castaneda or not, folks, I mean, this is really important. It's probably one of the most important things, or the most important thing that was written in any of the Castaneda books. And it talks about the predator mind, and I often recommend it to people. It's so important, folks, because this is the way through the puzzle. Because the reality is that there's a predator here. Everybody is under mind control, folks. We've got this thing that makes us have wars all the time. No matter how much we try to fix the world, we never get it fixed because the people that are running the world are completely overtaken by this predator mind. And this is what has caused all of these problems. And when we try to fix these problems, we search for a way out, and we're not realizing how the predator works and what the predator is.
When you're a vampire, you become very sexy.
He calls this the topic of topics, the predator mind. The predators, he says, they took us over because we are food for them, and they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their sustenance.
They're harvesting energy.
Just as we rear chickens in chicken coops, the predators rear us in human coops, therefore their food is always available to them. I want to appeal to your analytical mind. Think for a moment and tell me how you would explain the contradiction between the intelligence of man the engineer and the stupidity of his belief systems or the stupidity of his contradictory behavior. It is the predators who have given us our systems of beliefs, our ideas of good and evil, our social mores. The predators are the ones who set up our hopes, our expectations and dreams of success or failure. They've given us covetousness, greed and cowardice. It is the predators who make us complacent, routinary and egomaniacal. In order to keep us obedient, meek and weak, the predators engage themselves in a stupendous maneuver. Stupendous, of course, from the point of view of the fighting strategist, but a horrendous maneuver from the point of view of those who suffer it. They gave us their mind. Do you hear me? The predators gave us their mind, which becomes our mind. The predator's mind is baroque, contradictory.
Let it stay for a little bit. What's the big deal? You like champagne?
Johnny, what the fuck are you doing, you
morose and filled with the fear of being discovered any minute now.
Come on. We're gonna go upstairs, all right?
I will not die sober!
I know that even though you have never suffered hunger, you have food anxiety, which is none other than the anxiety of the predator, who feels at any moment its maneuver is going to be uncovered and its food is going to be denied. Through the mind, which after all is their mind, the predator injects into the lives of human beings whatever is convenient for them.
This is so fucking good, I should kill you.
The predators ensure in this manner a degree of security to act as a buffer against their fear. Okay, so that's how this predator works. And this predator is what it's talked of in all cultures, folks. I mean, the Africans call it the Chitahuri, the Gnostics called it the Archons, the Arabics call it the Jinn. I mean, it's in all cultures. They talk about this mind that gets in and infects you. Russia and stuff simply called it the social parasite. The thing that makes you do bad things even though you know they're bad and you do them anyway. It's the predator mind that makes this happen. And it's important to understand what the predator mind feeds on, because when you understand what its food is, you begin to see what we've been tricked into doing. They keep us alive in order for them to be fed with the energetic flares of our pseudo-concerns. It's our energy, it's our ethereal energy, all of our attention, everything. As we're putting all of our information and our thoughts into this flat motherboard, we're burning it all in the real world, and we're not paying attention to what's going on in the real world. So for many, the earth is becoming flat, and for many, the only way they will escape the destruction of this world that they're allowing to happen is by allowing this so-called ascension to happen and putting themselves on the mainframe on the next level down.
This world is run by vampires, the 1%ers. An invisible hand is controlling the world through the mechanism of central banks, which are right now involved in a complete takeover of the world.
This is what you want, this is what you get, this is what you want.
There is, however, a bug in the predator class's system. Pre-singularity, unelected Silicon Valley billionaires decided in secret who would get censored and who would be allowed free speech. Now that's all done by self-evolving super AI algorithms. But because those algorithms aren't human, they miss some things. Super AI is infinitely smarter than human beings in most ways that count. but it can't build convincingly realistic VR environments without input from human artists. And some of those artists, the best among them, have been weaving clues, Easter eggs, into VR programs that only alert humans will pick up on. Clues that reveal the true nature of the oligarchy's humanity-hating agenda. Clues that reveal the oligarchy as inhuman, something that hates us. Those clues can induce cognitive dissonance in most people. They find it hard to stay focused when the clues are right in front of them. It can feel like a witch has cast a sleeping spell on them, or like they're nearing the end of a weirdly hypnotic 4-hour movie. Sleep. 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 Forget all about the billionaire pedophiles, the intelligence agency-assisted narco-barons, and the killing pandemics wrought by CRISPR-edited bioweapons and DARPA-created nanobots. Sleep. Sleep. Forget about the radioactive oceans, the oil-blighted coastlines, and the poison-tainted GMOs sold to you by Whole Foods. Sleep. Forget about for-profit prisons, Wall Street's tireless labyrinth of Ponzi schemes, and the trillions spent on endless, unwinnable wars. Just sleep. Sleep. Open your eyes. If you can fight off that urge to sleep, you'll obtain gnosis, liberating knowledge that can free you from your false imprisonment. And when that gnosis reaches a critical mass of humanity, it'll be up to all of us to decide. Will we rise from slumber in unvanquishable numbers to overthrow our parasitical overlords? Or will we remain kings of oblivion?
This is what you get. This is what you want. This is what you get. This is what you want. This is what you get. This is what you want. This is what you get. This is what you want. This is what you get. This is what you want. This is what you get. This is what you want. This is what you get. This is what you want. This is what you get.
Apostles were sitting in swing saying we'll sell off a savior for a pair of new wings and some sandals in the style of the straps that cling best to the arrow. And then all of the businessers and their unlimited kill, where they buy and they sell, and they sell all their trash to each other. They're sick of it all, but they're bankrupt on selling. And then all of the angels came to sell off your souls for a pair of new wings. And anything goes, they remember their friends, the people they loved, and I've seen through them all, seen through them all, seen through most everything. All the people you knew were the actors. All the people you knew were the actors. To college, and I learned some big words, and I shouted and screamed, goddamn right, I was her. They remember the girl, know those big things she said back in college. And it takes a long time, I don't know if I'm clean with myself. I've been through string of young lovers. I still love one, loved him more when he was sober. it takes a long time